This is Alexander Constantine, and we have here the ever-entertaining and intelligent Mr. Fisto Sobani, and you are listening to the Deceneus Review, where we discuss novels, film, art, and culture from a perspective outside the mainstream. The Review is a Substack podcast, but you can listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and anywhere else via RSS feed. If you enjoy the show, please like, follow, and share this episode with everyone and everyone. All right, so today, I wanted to talk about, I'm going to introduce my guest in a second, but what I really want to talk about is podcasts in general, podcasts, and kind of my relationship to podcasts. So I've always had a long commute. Unfortunately, I've had to drive at least half an hour in most places, and that's a very typical thing in Southern California. Even when you work 10 miles from home, that's a 2-hour drive in most places in Los Angeles because of the traffic and twisty turning streets and the way the infrastructure is set up. So ever since I was a young guy and I drove around, I listened to talk radio. I used to listen to a lot of morning radio shows on K-Rock, 90.7. San Diego radio stations used to have a really good talk show. Down the line, I even got Sirius satellite radio, and I listened to some Howard Stern, which I found kind of crappy in retrospective. But I've always been a big fan of just listening to people have conversations on the radio, in real time or recorded. It's something that cleared my mind and allowed me to focus on a long drive, and it just made it better. And it also, I think, really plays into the whole feeling of you can be part of a conversation without actually have to personally contribute or without having to feel obligated to have to say something interesting, but you get the conversation, so you get the same kind of pleasure out of it. Well, in the more recent years, with the advent of easy streamable podcast, I started listening to, I believe the first podcast I really listened to was the Hardcore History with Dan Carlin. And I think the other day on Substack, I asked, whatever happened to Dan Carlin? And people saying he still does record episodes, but I found it was really interesting. And when I listened to a lot of Dan Carlin, I lived in Japan, and I would drive my little Toyota Passo, a little four-banger, and drive through the toll roads and listen to everything about whether it was his Roman Empire stuff or some of his more obscure ones like the Apocalypse and all those episodes. But in the last few years, I kind of settled on listening to two specific podcasts. And I've talked about them on this, and once again, my dogs are always barking. But I talked about them on this podcast, and one second.
So yeah, there's the dogs. Always an exciting time, ladies and
They
gentlemen.
sound friendly.
They're super friendly.
Yeah.
They have no podcast etiquette. That's their only problem. Ladies and germs, this is Brad Kelly, our podcast host. Mr. Alexandru will properly introduce this fine young gentleman in just a little bit. Here he is.
There, I'm back.
Ladies
Sorry.
and gentlemen, Alexander.
I'm not going to edit this. I was going to edit this, but I'm not going to.
Don't edit it. Don't edit it. Keep it real.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
brother.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that the two podcasts that I really got into and I've become a faithful listener to, the first one is Bret Easton Ellis's podcast. It's the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, right? And I find that one fantastic. And the second one is The Art of Darkness. Sorry, I was running down the stairs. And The Art of Darkness is probably my favorite podcast of all time. And today, one of the former co-hosts of The Art of Darkness, Mr. Brad Kelly, is here to join us. And Mr. Brad Kelly is joining us today on the Digital Labyrinth. He's an author, a podcaster, former member of The Art of Darkness, and you can find him on x.com at Brad Kelly or bradkelly-esque at substack.com. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Thanks for having me, man. This is great, and it's really, I'm really flattered to be put in such esteemed company. Dan Carlin was big for me too. I haven't listened to him much recently, but yeah, man, some of those World War I episodes and the Mongols and even that one about the Anabaptists.
That's my favorite.
Those
one.
Are great.
That's
yeah,
my
so
favorite
good.
One, the Munster Rebellion. Okay, I like all the weird episodes, man. I like all the
same
weird
here.
Shit.
Yeah, no, it's a great show. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. That's awesome, and it's so cool that uh, so many people, yourself included, have enjoyed Art of Darkness. I mean, that's awesome. That was the whole goal, and it's so I guess it's mission accomplished.
Well, it's a great podcast, and for once again for listeners at home that have not are not familiar with the Art of Darkness, uh, basically the Art of Darkness is a podcast where they take a artist, writer, musician, filmmaker, poet, playwright, all different artistic creators. That's such a lame word.
Mhm.
Artists, right? And you guys did a biography on them, specifically focused on what made them tick, what made them like create their art, and what's what you thought were some of the influences upon their art. And all of them, all the choices you guys made had some darkness in their lives. You didn't pick jolly, happy individuals, and they were all dead, right? That was you guys'
Yeah,
rule,
yeah,
right?
that was our rule. Yeah, it just kept things simple in
That's
a
such a
certain
good rule.
sense.
That's such a good rule
Yeah,
these days
yeah.
because yes, just yes.
Right, but I always wanted a David Lynch episode, but that's
It'll still probably happen,
right. Because well, the
in the
show is
future.
still ongoing. I know
The,
you
the
stepped
show
down,
continues, yeah.
you stepped down
Mhm.
from it, and we're definitely going to talk about Art of Darkness a little bit later. But what I really want to talk about is you, man. So,
Yeah, thanks.
if you want to just introduce yourselves to our listeners, kind of just a quick little intro besides what I did.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, so yeah, fiction writer, novelist, have a novel out there that you can get your hands on called House of Sleep. I've got another novel I just finished. Hopefully that sees the light of day sometime this year, and that's kind of for myself, that's I think of myself as sort of a writer first. But yeah, Art of Darkness podcast. Spent the last 4 years doing that, and despite the fact that I'm not going to be on there anymore, that we got a lot of episodes in the bank, and they're pretty much evergreen. It wasn't really a topical show, so those episodes will be worth listening to. Years down the road, I think. And I've got other interests as well. Uh, I read tarot, and I'm doing some writing on tarot and developing some other material around that. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Beyond that, man, I'm just a dude trying to express myself.
All right.
So
I mean, that's what we're
yeah,
doing.
yeah,
That's what we're doing here, man. That's what we're trying to do,
yeah,
right? Even though I cocked up that introduction.
yeah. Not at all, man. This is radio. It's
You, when I first started, did a lot of editing. I tried to edit a lot of
yeah,
the stuff, and then I was like, you know what, man, the hell with that.
yeah,
Just gonna free flow it. If my neighbor in the ice cream truck, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm gonna roll with it.
yeah.
I
I don't know if people know Art of Darkness. We basically never edited. I I would be there's probably 10 minutes of edited Art of Darkness out there out of all the
That's
episodes we
out of
put
all of
out.
it,
So
geez.
well, that's
yeah.
impressive because it sounds great. I'm always like, man, this doesn't sound good.
The
Um,
nice the nice part about not editing things is the opportunity to mess with people. Because like when you stepped away for a moment, I specifically paused slightly longer than my instinct wanted, simply because I wanted to mess with the listener. Like, is there
Right.
just not going to
Wait,
be any
what?
sound at all? Like, I hope listeners, if you could give feedback, just if you thought that for like the fear of, are they going to do dead air? Are they straight up
Right.
just fuck it? Here you go.
just
Yeah.
You got nothing
Yeah.
to listen
sorry
to.
guys, I
Just
got, I
deal with
gotta
it.
go. I gotta go check my coffee pot is boiling
Yeah,
over.
deal with it. Deal with it. Just to like
Well, that
check their devotion to the art. Like,
right, right, right,
are
right.
you guys really worthy of us? No, I'm
It
kidding, of
is
course.
it is funny how short that time is because like if I'm listening to something and somebody's talking and they take I don't know what it is 3 seconds 5 seconds to like think about their answer you
Oh
like
yeah,
I like check my phone I'm like did I lose a
that's
connection
eternity.
like what happened yeah
The maw opens and your soul
right
vanishes into it, and it's
yeah
only been 3 seconds.
exactly
You're like,
right
oh,
You're like,
yeah.
you,
It's kind of funny just how the perception of time is just such a fickle thing.
yeah.
yeah
I mean, and then I am not a professional audio guy. I've never had any formal training in the equipment, so everything I do is I've taught myself, and I'm slowly adding more and more equipment and more interesting stuff to make it more of a professional production. And sometimes I forget stuff. Like I think one episode I was like opening like a candy bar because I was like starving, and then somebody called me out on it. They're like, "God damn, the crinkling!" I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even think about it. I didn't realize that his microphone was gonna pick up like my crinkling candy bar."
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
I listened to one of the other podcasts I listen to regularly while driving is Red Scare. Oh my God, I'm
Mhm.
getting canceled again for saying this. And they're they're very like non-edited ish also, and they're always like lighting cigarettes or like I don't know hitting the bong or something, and you can hear like
Yeah.
police sirens in the background because they're in New York, and
I
like people
I
shooting
think
each other.
people actually like it. Like there's a threshold obviously, but I think like a little bit of that stuff, I think audiences actually like they enjoy it sort
Yeah.
of. Like it kind of adds some texture to the whole thing.
Yeah, it's kind of reminding me of like sound effects in like the old radio dramas. Like it lets you know, like, oh yeah, it just if it helps you visualize. Like I'm thinking about the snap of a lighter right now, and I'm like, man,
Mhm.
that would be just, the snap of the crack,
Yeah, yeah.
sucking in that first, and it's like, okay, all
Well,
right, it's about to get real.
you know,
It's shorthand for that.
so it's it's Wednesday right now, and we always record this on Wednesday afternoons, and that's because I come home from work and Fisto gets back from he gets off of work on Wednesdays, and it's a good time because it's when my daughter goes to dance class. So I don't have my
Ah,
daughter running around. She's 6 years old, and she tries her best, to be downstairs, but she has moments of I'm gonna slam doors and do that kind of thing. Unfortunately, we've got a new dog, and the new dog likes to play with the other dog and the cat, and this new dog is a giant Swiss Shepherd, and she's afraid of like everything. So like somebody walks by outside, she freaks out, and whatever. It's all
mhm.
part of the fun. But Brad, you're mainly an author, and that's kind of your number one thing. And I'm with you on that one. I like to think of myself as primarily an author and a podcaster for fun. And your first
Mhm.
novel is House of Sleep. And House of Sleep was a fantastic novel for listeners. It's not particularly an easy novel. I'm going to tell you the truth, right? It's one that requires a little bit of, I would say, it's a level two novel. Okay, it's not your fun action novel. It's got some thinking to it. There's some complexities to it that I really enjoy. It's exactly my kind of novel, the kind of novel I enjoy. And to give a kind of a brief, overview, the main theme is dreams and the ability to remember dreams and a cult-like environment and a very interesting kind of antagonist, co-tagonist kind of character named the Diving Man. Um, but I highly recommend it for everybody reading it. But what I don't want to do is I don't really want to talk about it that much. And the reason I don't want to talk about it that much because friend of this podcast, the guys from Book Club from Hell just did an episode with you on it, and they spent the entire time talking about it.
Yeah,
So if you listen to this podcast, you probably listen to those guys for the most part, and we would just be Eskimo brothers at that point talking about the
right.
same thing, right? So let's talk
Yeah,
about.
well, I appreciate the shout out for it though, man. That always definitely helps, and I definitely I want people to read it or check it out. At least go to my website and watch the trailer and get a sense of if you think it's for you or not. In fact, the first third of the book is available free in audio as like a podcast. So, you know, if you're listening to podcasts normally and you want to just check it out, try that out, and if you like it, buy it. If you don't, shut it off and listen to this podcast instead.
All right. So in the vein of the art of darkness, basically,
Mhm.
you're the subject right now. Why? Why write? Wwhy become an author?
Mm.
Why?
Yeah. Yeah, this is
Hmm.
a great question, man. And I'll be straight up, I'll be perfectly honest with you. Like, and I
Is it
don't
for
want
the
this to
is it for the girls, man? Because
no, no.
there's none. There's no money and no
I
women.
Is it for being
I
appreciated in your time and age? I'm sure that's part of
Not
it,
gonna
right?
happen
that
either, right?
that doesn't happen either. Yeah, I definitely never gotten girls because of I'm a writer, ever. I'm a happily married man, but I think that would have happened uh either way, you know. Um yeah, I don't know, man. Like there's I guess a few different things to it. There's one is I don't know, it's a sort of chicken or egg scenario, but like I don't know. I've realized that my brain works like a novelist's brain. And I don't know if I trained it to do that over time or that's just how it is. Like, a novel is for me, it allows me to channel all of the rabbit holes that my brain wants to go in and sort of point it all in a direction. So I'm kind of like figuring my way out of the labyrinth by writing a novel. Um, and so there's that aspect. There's this sort of like it's not therapy in that like, oh man, I need to like process my trauma or something, but like this is what my brain wants to do, and has sort of found this outlet for it. Um, the other, another aspect is like wanting to contribute to literature. Like I was obsessed with books when I was a kid. I always wanted to be a writer, like since I can remember. And somehow adding to that, getting a book on a shelf next to other books and I see all of literature is talking to each other. Maybe that sounds cheesy, but like every book is sort of in conversation with every other. And like I want to have like a small something to say in that very large conversation that's sort of bigger than all of us.
Right,
That's
right.
definitely part of it.
And I don't think that's cheesy at all. I mean, that is something. I mean, that's kind of what Cormac McCarthy said, right? The whole idea of the conversation of,
Mhm.
from the past to the present. And I don't know if you've read The Passenger and Stella Maris,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
what's his name? One of the characters in there talks about how, if you have books shared in common, it's like a bond almost as thick as blood or thicker than blood. And I think that I
hmm
think that literature as the artistic sphere shares a kind of a supernatural kind of, like
Yeah.
psychosphere of existence and uh, a consciousness that goes beyond the actual words on a page themselves, whether it's cultural or spiritual or emotional. And I think that's a great answer. Like you want
Yeah.
to be part of that
Yeah.
conversation, or contribute to that conversation because you have
Absolutely.
something to say. Not to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, that's definitely part of it. I mean, I kind of think of the entire creative enterprise, not just writing, but all the arts, uh, as that's sort of that's sort of the human species dreaming is music and film and books, right? Whatever function it is that dreaming has for the individual, the arts has for society. And uh so, that has a lot of that's a big territory, that dream space. And so I feel like there's kind of, oh, I don't quite want to say a responsibility, but there is almost a responsibility. Like if you have these ideas, you should and they're trying to get out, you should get them out somehow or another.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think responsibility is a good word for it. You write because you must.
Yeah.
Right because you must. The mountain's called, so I went. Like
Yeah.
if you don't do it, you're denying who you are, and
Mhm.
well, good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true. Like, and it's interesting because I hit this spot in my life. I'm in my early 40s now, and people like House of Sleep, but I would have loved my career to have gone even bigger than this, obviously. Who wouldn't? And you do get to a point where like, man, am I going to spend another 4 years writing this book for, I don't know, 50 people, 100 people? Man, is that, you start kind of it does start to weigh on you a little bit. Like, is this the right thing? Is this the best way to spend my time? Should I be using whatever meager skill I have in a more coordinated manner? You start asking yourself these questions, but ultimately, ultimately, I'm going to do the work one way or
Yeah.
the other. So,
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
there's only one way to find out, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
and that's a question that I think has crossed all our minds. And I want to say all our
Mhm.
minds is all of us that have written or are writing or are creating, is because you look at the the proclamations of the novel is dead. poetry's
Mhm.
dead,
Yeah.
music is dead or whatever, and it can be discouraging, it can be
Yeah.
like, especially if you are trying to write for money or that kind of stuff, and then you have to
Mm.
stop and go, I just have to write, man. I just have to.
Yeah.
I don't have a choice. I need to do it. It needs to come out. And if nobody reads it, that's fine, but I still put it down. I exercised it from myself. Um,
Yeah.
and that's a tough one. Well, when did you decide to do this? Was it something like, you listen to writer interviews and you get somebody like Flannery O'Connor that's been writing stuff since she was a little girl, and those kind of guys, or even more recent living authors will tell you like, oh, I started writing when I was in fourth grade, or
Yeah.
I always told people Dungeons and Dragons stories, and then I decided to become blah blah blah. When did you decide? Was it later
Yeah.
in life, younger? Did you always
No,
want to be a
man,
writer?
it was young. It was quite young. I mean, I couldn't even tell you. I don't really have a good memory when I didn't want to write. I I remember when I was, gosh, probably fourth grade, something like that. I remember my mom brought a like at her work, they had like an old typewriter in a closet or something, right? This would have been in like, I don't know, very early 90s. She brought it home and I just started banging out these weird little science fiction stories because I was obsessed with like the Twilight Zone, right? And so kind of started then like grade school. And then, went through various phases and, got really into like the beats when I was in high school, and kind of kept at it. Went to college for originally my first degree. I got an engineering degree because I was, I understood that like I was never going to, it was going to be very difficult to become financially independent if I had just got an English degree or something, right? So kind of went to engineering, moved out of Michigan, where I'm from, moved to Idaho, and just immediately got a full-time gig, but immediately went back to school to take writing workshop classes. Just like I'm gonna take fiction classes, poetry classes, screenwriting, whatever they'll let me do. And then after a few years of that, I went and got an MFA at the University of Texas. And so, and then just kind of kept pushing at it. And it's been sort of guiding beacon. A lot of the choices I've made in my life have been, all right, if I do that, am I going to have time to write? Okay, I got to do this, but how can I sort of rearrange that so I have some time to write? That's been kind of how I've shaped most of my life. So, yeah, it's always been there, and I don't have as much to show for it as I probably ought to, given all that time. But I've got like probably four or five draft novels. They're not finished, but they're written beginning to end that are just on my hard drive that'll never see the light of day. So it took a lot. It took it took writing two or three books to write House of Sleep. So
Right.
I'm slow, I guess.
I mean, and you know what? That's perfectly fine. I'm a fan of
Yeah.
slow. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm slow. I'm a slow writer also.
Yeah.
I'm a slow podcaster.
Yeah, that's all right, man. That's all right.
But I
Well,
mean,
there's a
go ahead.
trend. I mean, the internet wants you to do everything fast. It wants
Oh,
everything to be out
yeah.
now.
So
And
gross.
and and
Ugh.
there's a certain sense in which you do have to cater to that a little bit, I guess. But like it's for me, it was important to like not let that overtake everything, right? Like resist that urge to like put the thing out right now. Yeah, that's been important for me.
Well, and on that, you're I'm sorry, on that topic, right? Like, I think that writing, for the most part, is, in my opinion, a middle age or old man's or woman's game to a
Yeah.
certain degree.
Yeah.
Um, Music, for example, there's something about music that is, out of all the art forms, is the most raw. It somehow
Mhm.
speaks to you. Music is a lot more universal than writing. Everybody, whether you speak the language or you don't, can feel a rhythm or a beat, or just drums. It's very primal. It's very
Yeah.
there's something, a shamanistic quality to it that is universal human. And all cultures banged some drums somewhere and
Yeah.
sometime, and and I think because of that, because of its raw element, kind of it suits itself to the young man. Of course,
Mhm.
you have fantastic, symphonies and great pieces of classical music, or even contemporary music made by older men and women. But for the most part, the window for music tends to be teens to your 30s, your
Yeah.
late 30s. You don't really get, maybe because there's a visual element to it also when it comes to the financial aspect of it. But I don't know, it just seems that like there's a raw emotional level that gets dulled in an older individual that doesn't come off as well. But writing, I've noticed, tends to be opposite. And of course, there's fantastic first novels written by, teenagers or guys right out of high school. I mean, I said Bret Easton Ellis wrote Less Than Zero and American Psycho in his early 20s, or actually his
That's
teens for
crazy.
Less Than Zero. But if you open Less Than Zero right now, it reads like a teenager wrote it.
Right.
And a lot of the novels that are written by younger people, I have a hard time connecting to as an older man, because I just feel like, bro, you've never been anywhere.
Yeah,
You
you
know?
don't know anything. You don't know
Yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
there's a missing element, and at the same
Mm.
time, even reading it sometimes, uh, a novel has a complete and total different vibe than, or a different meaning in your 30s than it does in your teens, or that, right?
Absolutely.
One of the, you guys over in Art of Darkness did the oh my gosh, the F. Scott Fitzgerald episode, right?
Hmm.
And we
Yeah.
all know F. Scott from The Great Gatsby, and we know The Great Gatsby because it's something that's a mandatory novel in almost all high
It's the
school.
one
Yeah.
book you will read,
It's the
Yeah.
one
It
whether
book,
you
is.
right?
like it or not.
Right,
Yeah.
and there's an
Yeah.
interesting story why behind it. I'm sure everybody knows that, it was assigned to the GIs in around World War II, and that's kind of where its popularity became such a thing. I think
And they
that
all became high school teachers
right, and they all
eventually.
became high school teachers, right, when they came home after and
Yeah.
used the GI Bill to
Yeah.
get the right. But I think one of the reasons that it's a novel that's read in a high school is because it's short, right?
Yeah.
It's a very short novel, and it, on a surface level, it's a novel that you can see it kind of appealing to young people. But I've
Mhm.
always felt that okay. I will add the caveat, right? I think that first chapter in The Great Gatsby is one of the greatest pieces of literature written in the 20th
Yeah.
century, right? If
Yeah,
you
I agree
have
with
not
that.
read it since high school, or you've never read it, and you're interested in literature and the sound of language and the written word, open that novel right now and read it, because it is a pure masterpiece, and it's
Mhm.
unmatched, I think, right? Um, but I don't think it's a novel that is intended for a teenage boy. It is a
Mm.
novel that hits a lot harder when you're, you know, in your 30s or
Yeah.
post your initial thing, because it's a novel looking back on time, and a
Right.
teenage boy fresh, into adulthood, getting ready to go on to his life, is just not going to get the kind of nihilistic pessimism that Nick Carraway spits out in that novel, right? Because
Yeah.
what he's basically telling you is, man, no matter what you try, class is more important than money, and
Mhm.
don't be a cuck.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really what he's
Yeah.
saying, right?
Yeah.
And you just don't get that. You just don't get that. You can
It's
sit
funny.
down. Mhm, go ahead.
Sorry, it's funny how you're explaining music is kind of a young man's game. Therefore, listening is probably also more of a young man's game. Because with reading, like you don't want to read younger folks because guys, you haven't done anything. Well,
Mhm.
as a reader, yeah, it's the same. I haven't done anything, so I don't know what to read. I read stuff and yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, I haven't read Great Gatsby since high school, fully, completely admit it. And I'm thinking to
Yeah.
myself, yeah, I better pick that back up and take another look through. Because you're right, I'm sure it'll be a complete, utter revelation because I've actually done stuff since I was an
Yeah.
idiot. 16-year-old
Oh
idiot.
yeah, there's a thread of pain in The Great Gatsby that a 17-year
I
old
remember that.
I don't think they will struggle to see it.
Yeah. A vague
Maybe
sense that something's wrong.
right. A sophisticated reader probably will at that age, but like your average, you just pick the
Yeah.
random kid,
Yeah.
they're probably not gonna see that.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the teachers don't teach it well. And the reason the
No.
teachers don't teach it well because is ultimately what are you gonna tell these kids? Well, this novel is about this guy named Gatsby that works really, really hard to get everything, but ultimately he's a cuck and the rich
Yeah.
people stick together and he's always ostracized and then he
Yeah.
dies. Yeah. You know what I mean? And everybody's
Right,
awful
right,
and the American
right.
dream is fake. Congratulations. I hope you guys enjoy your graduations and good luck in college. You know?
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
downer novel, so they don't bring it up, and it's a very masculine novel, and I think a lot of
Hmm.
English teachers tend to be women, and they really, I think, miss the point of the novel. They focus on its surface tendencies, it's its gilded age kind of, the whole art deco vibe,
Mm.
that Lana Del Rey kind of vibe that they've got going in that
Yeah.
novel, and they miss the point. Another novel that also hit me differently twice that I've read was my favorite novel, The Brothers Karamazov.
Mm.
And spoilers, Fisto, if you haven't finished it yet,
Come at
right?
me. Come at me. Come at me.
Okay.
Go for it.
So when
I
I
don't
put
mind. I don't
so
mind.
The Brothers Karamazov was a novel I read for the first time as a junior in high school, and it was handed to
Wow.
me by my I had a multinational or like literature of the world class I took. It was like an elective course, like an AP course. And for some reason, everybody in that class was really dumb. I don't know why. And the teacher knew they were all dumb. And I was the good smart boy. So she walked up to me one day. She's like, "Hey, I'm gonna give you books and you just read them and come back like in a month, right?" And the first book she gave me was Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I don't know if you guys ever heard
Mm.
that one. It's a
Hmm.
interesting, it's like kind of a psychedelic, spiritual, hippie book about a seagull. That's basically Seagull Jesus. Um, look it up. It's very interesting if you
Yeah,
haven't
you're
heard of
right.
it, right? Um, yeah,
Sounds like a very LA thing for you to read.
she was a very cool teacher. Okay,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
and then she handed me The Brothers Karamazov, and I read it. I just powered through it. I loved it. I was like, oh my God, I love this book. But I
Mm.
really, really identified with Ivan, right? The philosopher brother, the middle brother, because I was in my soon to be hyper Reddit atheist type phase. Reddit didn't exist back then, but um, and I felt like everybody was stupid and wrong, and I was right. And so basically, I was a high school boy that was smart, like I was that guy.
Mhm.
And I thought everything was dumb, and God was fake, and everything spirituality is stupid, and everybody's evil. And I pretty much missed the whole part about him getting brain fever and dying. But that's what I identified with. And many
Mm.
years later, I'm sitting in a C-130 flying across the Pacific, and I'm reading The Brothers Karamazov again. And now I'm older, I'm a father, and I've seen some shit, done some stuff, right? And I'm sitting there going, oh man, I am no longer Ivan, you know?
Mm. Hmm.
Right? I am the older brother now. That's whose life I've lived. I didn't live the life of Ivan, I lived the older brother.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Yeah.
Remind me real fast.
Oh,
Well,
oh gosh.
Alyosha was the younger one, right?
Alyosha's the
Yeah.
youngest one. So it's
What
Ivan,
is the oldest?
Alyosha, and
Oh, I'm
Ivan.
not gonna get it right.
Oh my God, I need to pull this up. I can't believe I
Yeah, you're
forgot
gonna.
my
I should
favorite.
probably remember it because I'm actually actively reading it, but I'm.
Yeah, Dimitri comes to
Dimitri.
mind.
Yes,
Is it
Dimitri.
Dimitri?
That's
That's
right.
right.
Okay.
It's
Yep.
Dimitri.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm Dimitri. Dimitri, the soldier, the guy that goes out and he's in love with Grushenka and he goes on his gypsy orgy rampage and blows all his money and then obviously gets accused of killing his father. And he lived a life of kind of debauchery compared to both Ivan and Alyosha. And I
Rip off the old block.
I didn't like him. I didn't like him as a teenager. I thought he was just a stupid like bro. I was like, look at this guy.
Mm.
He's an asshole. And then I ended up being Dimitri for a long time. And then
It's probably
Right.
why you hated him. You knew what was gonna
maybe
happen
maybe I knew it, right. And then I
deep
realized that like
down.
I felt it. I felt the lure of Grushenkas in my life, and I felt the lure of vodka with gypsies in my life,
Mhm.
and I I got it, it clicked, right? It clicked how the dichotomy between Ivan and Dmitri, and of course now I wish I was Alyosha, right? Of
Yes.
course, I don't think you can be Alyosha, only
Mhm.
Alyosha's Alyosha, right? And
Mhm.
it's tough, right? And it's interesting, but that book hits so much differently as an older man than it does as a teenager, and it's just a completely different novel when you reread it. And yeah, I really feel like the best authors, or the ones that have the most to say, or the ones I connect with, are a little bit older and have been there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you look, you did the Art of Darkness, and almost all those people that you guys chose, they did stuff. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're out
Yeah.
there. They were living life, and the life that they lived gave them something to say. Even if they wrote like about fucking sandworms on Arrakis or something like that.
Right.
It's
Right.
still their life, informed the art, and it was critical to the foundation. They spoke a truth. They wrote a truth, right? That's one thing I took from that show, is that all these guys were telling the truth, even when they
Yeah.
were not
Yeah.
telling the truth. Um,
Yeah.
for all you Star Trek nerds out there, there's my favorite character in Star Trek is Garrick. And there's
Mhm.
a great line in Star Trek Deep Space Nine when the very naive young Dr. Bashir asks Garrick, after their 7 years of a relationship, when he finds out that Garrick is a Obsidian network like spy, or he's been a spy his entire life. And he asks him, "Hey, man, all those stories you've told me, were they all lies? I mean, were any of them true?" And Garrett looks at him, and he says, "Everything was true, especially the lies." You know,
Yeah.
and
I
it's
remember
just
that
Yeah.
scene.
the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
line.
Plain simple Garrick.
Right, and
Yeah.
it's such a
Yeah.
great line, because that's being an author, right? Garrick's an
Mhm.
author, right? Because
Yeah.
we lie, we're making stuff up, but they're
Yeah.
truthful lies.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, man.
failed authors
Yeah.
are the ones that lie, but they're not truthful lies.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, man,
This
you
is
said you're trying to dig, you're trying to, and as I go on in my writing career, my plots and characters and things become more weirder and stranger and like, uh, and more idiosyncratic. But like, I actually feel like I'm getting closer to telling true stories than when I was trying to do like whatever literary realism I was doing when I started, you know?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's
something
interesting.
something that I've seen, and I'm not an author, I'm a teacher, but
Mhm.
this year in class I've made it a point to point out, kids, are myths true? No, they're
Mm.
not. Do they have truth in them? Yes. It's
Yeah,
made all the
yeah,
difference. It's been a
yeah, for
completely
sure.
kind of year to, and especially like right now we're in the middle of midterms, and the midterm that I constructed for them, it's about making a myth of the class that we've had. And I'm seeing kids make leaps of intuition and making leaps of logic that I'm just like, oh, hell yeah. This is the
That's
shit
cool.
right into my veins. And
Yeah.
it's true because it's truthful.
hmm
It's communicating a
hmm
truth. And that's probably the best we can hope for in a lot of ways. And that's why so much, literature that does that, it just knocks it out of the park. I mean, what
Well,
else is there
Yeah.
to say?
well, it is
Yeah.
the most human thing, and I think Brad, you touched on it perfectly. That uh, creating art is a collective dreaming, because we live in both the material world, and we also live in our intellectual, mythical kind of literary fiction world that we live in, where we
Mhm.
have lies, like stories and myths, right? Lies, I guess, right? That are honestly true. It's interesting right now, like 2 months ago. So I'm quick thing. So for St. Patrick's Day, my wife always goes all out with all the stuff we do for our daughter, right? So for St. Patrick's Day, she always like the leprechaun comes and brings her a gift. It's
Oh,
always like a
cool.
small gift, right? But she always like gets like food coloring and like draws like little shoe prints on the ground and stuff, and then puts like green food coloring in the toilet bowl downstairs because the leprechaun peed in the toilet, and leaves her
I
thing,
love it.
right? And it's the
Yeah.
funniest thing. I don't know where she got the idea, probably online somewhere, but it's something that my daughter loves. And we obviously do Santa Claus and Christmas and everything. And 2 months ago, my daughter like looks at my wife and she goes, "Mom, are you the leprechaun?" And my
Oh
wife's like,
no.
she goes, "Well, do you want me to tell you the truth or not?" Right?
Yeah.
And then my daughter goes, "Are you the tooth fairy?" Right?
Yeah.
And she
Yeah,
goes,
because once they identify one, they all fall. Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairies, they all
"Right,
go
they're all
pretty
gone,
much.
right?"
Santa,
Yeah.
And
Dad.
obviously
Wait,
Santa
no.
came up next, and my wife's like, "Do you want to know the truth, or do you want me to just say nothing?" My daughter's like, "Um, I'll ask you some other time." Right?
Nice. Smart girl. Good girl.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so Christmas is around the corner. Oh, wait, I think they already left. Let me look at my car, see if my car's. Oh, the car here's still here. I don't want her to overhear me saying this, but Christmas is coming along, and we are doing Santa, and it's the same
Mhm.
conversation. But I know she knows.
Mhm.
I know without a doubt that she knows the truth,
Yeah.
but she's choosing to live the other truth, the more
Yeah.
interesting one. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, is there a Santa? Yes. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, the myth of, in this case, Santa Claus, it is it's the easier to tell narrative that encapsulates the whole like mystery tradition and everything else about Christmas. It's
Right.
like it's like you can say, "Oh, Santa Claus isn't real," and then it's like Christmas makes less sense then. Like it becomes it's weird. It's sort of like and it's a fruitful to do this, I suppose, but it's sort of like saying, well, why do we put up a tree? Well, I don't know. Well, we should stop putting up the tree then. Like,
Right.
no, like the tree does it just because you can't articulate it doesn't mean that the tree doesn't mean something.
Right.
And just because Santa Claus isn't quote unquote real doesn't mean that there's some kind of important cycle is being enacted by we us all kind of pretending that Santa Claus exists. I see this like narrative every Christmas kind of come up on Twitter where people are like, "Do you lie to your kids? Why do you lie to your kids about Santa?" And it's like that's not a lie. You put your kids in front of TV shows that are lies all the time. Is that
Right.
lying to them?
Right.
Like
Is
it's not.
Batman
It's a
is like reading like or watching a show about Batman a lie? You know?
right. Yeah, exactly. And it seems like it's a very like yeah, it's
Yes,
a
I will lie to my children about Santa so they don't grow up to be an idiot on Twitter.
Yeah, to be
right.
That's
yeah,
that's that's what's
a
happening.
joyless
That's what's happening.
deracinated, like
Right.
atomized
Yes.
asshole,
Right,
Yes.
right. Yeah, we got to run a like an ROI analysis on every gift you buy them or
Yes,
something.
absolutely.
Like,
Yes,
yeah.
that yes, that is parenting properly.
Yeah.
I will tell my children all about Santa simply to piss you off, sir.
Right,
That is out of
exactly.
spite, which is the best reason to do
Exactly.
anything in my
Yeah,
mind.
we're gonna start making up other mythical creatures,
Hmm.
Right,
just the
Absolutely.
right. But it's that, and this is like a cheesy thing you talk about, like egregores and stuff, and you've
Yeah.
got the idea of, you got the idea of Batman, and is Batman real? I mean, no, obviously he's a creation of some writers at DC Comics back in like the
Yeah.
40s or whatever. But I
Yeah.
know who he is, I know what he looks like,
Mhm.
and I know what his name is, and I know who his parents were, and I know where he lived, and I know more about him than I know about my neighbor next door,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and there's from like an almost an anthropological standpoint, there's a reason we keep telling ourselves the Batman story. Like, and if you sort of ask yourself that question, like, why are we rebooting Batman? And obviously, like you can say, oh, well, it's already it's bankable IP or whatever, right? But like there is a reason why we keep telling that story. And if you ask yourself, okay, why are we doing that? And really get into, okay, well then what is Batman? What are the things that make him Batman that if you take him away, he's not Batman anymore? Like you really do start getting into something that tells you, I think, quite a bit about maybe not everybody's psyche, but particularly a masculine psyche in the case of Batman, right? Like, yeah, we all want to be billionaires who fight for justice and do the right
Yeah,
and like channel our trauma into something generative that might save the world. That's what we all want to do,
right.
right?
Before
So
Batman,
it's
there
like
was Zorro,
right, right.
and there was
Yeah.
other
Yeah,
characters
I'm thinking all the
like
way back
that.
to Robin Hood.
Robin Hood,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, Robin
It's
Hood too.
yeah, and it's Robin Hood. He's doing it because of the love of the king. You know,
and
he's
he's
doing it for
rich,
the right reasons.
Hmm.
and he's
Hmm.
rich. He's
Yeah.
rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's an aristocrat, you know. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
You know what? Hold on. You said it. Aristocratic. It is
Yeah.
aristocratic. It's how
Yeah.
aristocrats are supposed to function. In our
Hmm.
society, where we don't have a functioning aristocracy,
Hmm.
Batman is that invented, and he's doing it in the way that he would have to. He has to hide in plain sight. You know,
Yeah.
he's got to look, oh
Yeah.
yeah, Bruce Wayne, man, yeah,
Right.
woo,
Right.
and
Right.
then go beat wholesale ass on the Joker later. I mean, that's just how this works,
Right.
right.
Right. Right.
I mean, the
Yeah.
Joker, a force of chaos. You know, he's a
Yeah.
right?
aristocrat controlling the forces of chaos and the forces of decay in the city. It's
Hmm.
completely a never-ending, never-winning
You
battle
need me,
against
Batman.
insanity, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
Yeah.
mean, but yeah, I mean, we can go talk about Batman for an entire episode, but
Did
but
not expect that this evening.
No,
Here we go.
I like
Here we
Batman,
go.
It's
Ah,
a good
Batman's
story.
fantastic. Batman's
Batman's actually
fantastic.
the only superhero I like. Well, I don't think he's a superhero at
Really?
all. I'm not a, I've never been a huge superhero guy. I've
Yeah,
never
that's
really
fair.
liked. I honestly, I will tell you guys the truth. The last Marvel movie I've ever seen was the first Iron Man. I just don't. I don't like. I'm not
Oof,
one of those guys
based.
that's like, ugh, Marvel's lame. I just don't really care for it. It just
Yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't appeal to me. But Batman,
Yeah.
ever since I saw like Batman Returns in the theaters as like a 7-year-old or whatever
Yeah.
when it came out, I just watched Batman Returns, by the way, and it still holds up excellent.
It's
All
good.
right.
Michelle
Yeah.
We have
Pfeiffer
to
as
do it.
Catwoman is freaking
Oh,
just,
bro.
oh
Yeah.
man. But I
Would.
didn't, when I first watched it, I always cared for Michael Keaton as Batman. I still like Michael Keaton as Batman, but rewatching Batman Returns, it's Michelle Pfeiffer and Danny DeVito's movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
That's
is.
the
Yes,
two
that
stars
was.
of that movie. Batman is
Mhm.
like whatever, dude. Go out there and into your goon cave or whatever.
He's like the straight man in a comedy. It's like,
Right, right,
yeah,
Hmm.
it's not you're not really watching for him. Yeah.
right. But like,
So is this all safely Team Keaton? Is that what we have going
I'm a
on
team.
here?
I'm a Team Keaton guy. I'm
Team
sorry.
Yeah.
Keaton. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I
Without
don't actually like any of the Nolan Batman movies at all. I've seen them all in
Well,
theaters when they came out. I don't love them. They're good, but I don't think they're as great as people
they're
make
not
them
the
out
ones
to
I want
be.
to watch. Like if I was sitting Mike Child
hmm.
down to show them Batman, I'd throw on the very first Batman. Done.
Yeah.
Jack Nicholson, all that. That's what they would see.
I think
So,
Oh, dude.
The
and then
Nolan
go
movies are
from
too
there.
straight. They're too straight. They're
Mm,
too like serious and techy.
yeah.
They're like a California computer nerd's idea of Batman.
Yeah. It'd
Yeah.
probably have to be
Yeah.
Keaton. Then I would go back to Adam West. And then if they still cared, I'd continue on from there.
Dude,
I
animated series.
Oh
Batman
yeah,
the
Oh my
animated
God, yes, of
series.
course.
Batman
Yeah.
Returns and
Yeah.
I always forget that because I
Yeah.
get in the movie silo and then I
Right,
forget.
right. But dude,
Dude,
the
I'm
animated
playing,
series is
bro.
excellent.
I'm playing the show intro in my mind as we speak. I can
Uh-huh.
see the lights of those zeppelins. Like, yeah, dude.
yes,
It's
and
so good.
the WB logo turns into the Zeppelin.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and they were
And then
doing
with
this like
Batman,
whole like
go
yeah,
ahead, go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just saying they were like doing this whole like retro futuristic art deco thing that like the aesthetic
go.
of it was awesome.
Yeah.
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 And
When he
like
slips in and the two robbers turn and it's just like, oh
Yeah.
my God, yes,
some
let's
cool little.
go.
So I think the
Yeah.
animated series is like peak Batman when it comes to
Mhm.
Yes,
visual Batman. Peak
yes,
Batman
actually, yes,
followed by the Tim Burton
100%,
Batmans. I
100%.
actually liked the most recent Batman. I thought it was pretty good. I thought Edward the Vampire was actually pretty good in as
It was.
Oh,
young
that's
like
right. I forgot
Kurt
about that.
Cobain. Kurt Cobain as Batman kind of vibe that he had.
Cobain is Batman.
Yeah.
Oh
Well, I mean,
no.
he had the Nirvana song as the leitmotif throughout the whole movie, and I thought it was
Yeah.
really well done. I just
Yeah.
didn't think that Catwoman was good in it. She was good.
No.
She's a good-ish actress. She just lacked chemistry with Batman that you find it in the Michael Keaton, Michelle Pfeiffer. There's a lot of
Yeah.
chemistry in that thing. But some cool little side facts about the animated series. It was, drawn on black paper,
Yes.
Yeah.
which is really cool. And they invented Harley Quinn.
Yeah, they did.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harley Quinn
Yeah.
did not exist in the comic books until she was retro added after the animated series because people liked that character so much.
Yeah.
They also
Yeah.
invented Clayface, I think, which is another kind of weird.
Clayface is awesome. That's my like every time they make a Batman movie, I'm like, where the hell is Clayface?
Where's my boy Clayface? Where's my
He's my
boy?
favorite villain.
Right now we get
Such
the
a cool.
CGI to do. We get the CGI to do Clayface.
Yeah.
Let's get some
They could totally
Clayface
do
going,
Clayface.
bro.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The Riddler
proper use
sucks. The
of.
Riddler is like incel Joker, basically. It's
Yeah.
just not
That
not as cool.
he's not
Whatever,
as the
whatever,
Riddler
whatever,
is not as smart as he thinks he is, I
whenever
don't
he
think.
shows up, whenever he shows up, that episode or anything with the Riddler, it's always, I'm gonna do it because I love Batman. And
Yeah.
like you're not there for Riddler. It's just it's like reading Great Gatsby in high school. You're gonna have to do it. You have to watch the Riddler episodes because some asshole came home from World War II, decided that this was a thing. Like, all right, fine.
Right.
I'm gonna
Well,
do it for
Yeah.
the meme.
Yeah.
well, Brad, welcome
Yeah.
to the Dicenius review, where we start with all sorts of points and topics, and then we go
No,
on
I
a
love this. I love
2 hour
this, man.
tangent about Batman or what was we
Yeah.
were on last week? We were on about Demolition Man and
Oh
Terminator
yeah.
2.
Oh yeah.
That's what we went
There
on,
you
I
go.
think.
Yeah, talking about the eroticism of Terminator.
Yeah, the
What the hell is wrong
Mm.
with us, bro?
Yeah,
What is wrong with us?
the best
Yeah,
sex scene in fiction.
the greatest sex scene of the '80s, and we're like Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor in Terminator. Like what?
Though, Lisa though, she won
Oh,
levels of
suck.
esteem in my eyes, because right away
Yeah.
she knew what scene I was talking before I
Oh,
even
yeah.
mentioned it,
Oh,
and I was
yeah.
like, oh, my dogs are like fighting. This Clayface.
Go into a deep dive of how it shows like the humanity of man versus the inhumanity of the machine, like as he guns down other machines inside the police station.
Yeah, but bum sex in the motel room, the peak of
Hell yeah.
humanity against the
Yeah, absolutely.
the
In the face
machines.
of the apocalypse. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's
But
time to bone.
so I think we went down a little esoteric kind of topic on writing, which brings us to the next question, right? One of the things you're known for, Brad, is your tarot card.
I was just gonna say,
Sure.
this is
Yeah.
the pivot.
So
This is
you
the
are
pivot.
Yeah.
this
I
is the
love it.
second time we've gone into tarot cards on this episode. When we had
Yeah.
the New York goth girl on here, we did tarot readings, and I lost all my
Oh, right on.
followers.
I missed that. I missed that one. That's cool.
That was
Yeah.
That's fun.
But yeah, so you're interested, obviously from House of Sleep, there's a lot of occult and esoteric, I would say you deal with the dreams and everything, which is a very Jungian kind of topic, and
Mhm.
you are into tarot cards, and
I am. Yeah.
you've talked a lot about that on The Art of Darkness. Would you want to tell us about I too am into tarot cards, by the way.
Okay.
So
Cool.
um,
Yeah.
I want to see if
Well,
we're maybe on the same page. So what attracts you to tarot cards?
yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to even. I think like a lot of things, somebody gave me a reading and it was a lot more effective than I anticipated it would be. Like I was very skeptical and it was just like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And by the end of it, I was like, holy shit, what is going on here? Like you keep pulling out these damn cards and they're giving me goosebumps. So it was a little bit of just like what drew me to it was like I needed to figure out what that was. And then I can get a little obsessive about things. I'm tend to be like a all in or nothing kind of person. Like I'm not good at like hobbies. Like I can't just do something a little bit. And
Obsessions only.
yeah, pretty much. Like I don't
Good.
have I don't have hobbies.
You just
yeah.
like, you know what? I'm really into authors, so I'm going to start a podcast for like 4 years and
Yeah.
300,000 hours.
Right, exactly, exactly. So, I just decided like, all right, I'm gonna buy a deck and I'll buy a book and I'll just kind of see where I go with this. And I ended up, spending half an hour to an hour a day for like a year, just like figuring this thing out until I could give a reading. And it just turns out that it's like the tarot ends up being this weird, dynamic, ever evolving repository for like every aspect of Western thought. Like it captures elements of the Kabbalah and numerology and Christianity and supposed Egyptian thought, various esoteric trends. And then you can find all kinds of other stuff in it, right? It's like, psychological concepts are all kind of buried in there. And so it's just fascinating from that standpoint. It's like every card is this um, uh, endlessly unfoldable system of symbols. And then when you go take, you take multiple cards and you randomize them and you present them in a reading, there is a there is a manner in which for me that's a sort of like a form of writing. I kind of see it as an extension of writing because you're taking these elements and you're trying to arrange them into a narrative that's, a little bit less formalized storytelling than if you're sitting down to write a story, but nonetheless, you're piecing it together into a narrative that makes sense and hopefully is meaningful to the person you're presenting it to. So, um, so yeah, it's like, I don't know. I still have a lot of like questions about the metaphysics of it. Um, but the one thing I have found out is that like it almost always means something. Like if you do them for yourself, I do give people tarot readings. I'm trying to do that more and more and more because I dig it and people seem to enjoy it when they have one. Um, it yeah, I don't know, man. It taps you. The more you learn about it, it really taps you. You feel like, anyway, you're tapping into almost like this secret uh uh pattern of how things work, or at least how things work within a human life or within a human conscious experience. And so, yeah, I'm constantly learning things. I'm trying to write a piece right now on the star card. I'm sort of gradually, very slowly writing a little thing on each card. And I don't know, I've done like 13 or 14 of them. I'm writing one on the star right now. And dude, it's like seeped into my life just working on this piece. Like it's like this little 1,000 word piece, and it's like it literally feels like it's uh yeah, it feels like it's actually working its way into my everyday thinking and what I'm noticing about the world and what's happening in my life. It's very strange.
Right,
And I'm always drawn to the strange.
right. And
Yeah.
I think, and when you mention something like tarot,
Mhm.
right away in some individuals, they're gonna get red flags up, like, oh my
Oh
God,
yeah.
occultism, you're a
Yep.
Satanist,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, groan, oh God, sure, let
Can
me
I
I'm
can I share that
sorry.
I'm not that guy, but
Yeah.
my experience of tarot starts with my mother growing
Oh
up, and
yeah.
I'm in high school, and it's Mom, just leave. No, I don't want to play with your dumb cards. I'm gonna go
That's
hang out
fair.
with my
That's fair.
friends and listen to Nirvana and you
Your mom
know
was like a
Yeah.
gypsy or something, or what?
no, my mom is
Nice.
just into stuff.
She's in
I mean, she's
I
okay,
cool.
dig it.
interesting.
I'll probably send her this episode and be like, "Mom, check it out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You were right." I'll let her get the last laugh before she goes.
There you go.
My
She gets
mom
the
Yeah.
was
last laugh and nothing.
into reading
No,
like coffee
yeah,
grounds and tea leaves, which is like a
yeah,
very
no,
Eastern
Oh,
no,
European thing.
no. My
yeah.
mom's just an old lady who knows things. That's
That's
really kind of the
awesome.
best I'm gonna
She
say
knows
it, but
practical magic, like
I don't
Yeah.
even deep Catholic, deep Catholic Celtic, like, yeah, I don't want to open that door because I'm afraid of
Mm,
what's going to come out. All right. I mean,
yeah.
she knows things. That's all I'm going to say about it. But
so.
I love her.
Yeah. See, I've
I
tried to
love her
open all.
dearly,
I've
but
been
good God.
I've been
Yeah. Anyway,
trying to open all of those doors. That's
yeah,
been
man.
part of my life.
Those
Has been
doors are
trying to
opening
open
up
all those
on me.
doors.
I don't even like
Yeah.
they're coming at me. So that's why I'm just
Yeah.
kind of like, oh God. But
Yeah.
with the way you described it though, I think of the improv, to take it back to what we said earlier, like about music, for example. Music has an improvisational aspect to it.
Hmm.
And especially in jazz and things like that, you're tying together disparate parts to make a narrative. And I find when
Hmm.
I teach and study history, I'm doing the same thing. There's all these
Hmm.
pieces, parts, and I got to try to make sense of it. So that way I
Yeah.
can speak a myth that it may not be true exactly, but it contains truth in it. And I
Hmm.
mean, isn't
Hmm.
that just all humans do? We tell stories to
Yeah.
make sense of this collective fever dream we're enjoying.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
what I'm about to say is gonna upset some people, okay?
Bring it,
And
yes.
it's gonna upset a subset of writers,
Good, yes.
musicians.
Do it.
I don't think that you can learn how to be a writer, and I don't think you can learn how to be a musician, okay? Yes, you can learn how to write. You can
Hmm.
practice writing. You can learn how to play guitar, but you can't. There's something there's something metaphysical about art. Okay, there's you can take 100 children and you can put them through the same exact training as Michelangelo did, and they're still not going to make David. You know,
Hmm.
No. Yeah.
Hmm.
um, because there is a divine element in art, and I will never be the kind of person that says, "Oh, I have that divine element," right? But
Yeah.
I think that there's a metaphysical, and I think a Jungian explanation is kind of the best I like to use. Where there's
Mhm.
a like a overall consciousness, universal consciousness, right? And of symbols, and the semiotic consciousness that artists can, if they're lucky, if God is willing and universe is willing, or whatever you believe in, right? That
Hmm.
for 1 second sometimes you can tap into it and you just write. And every writer or musician I've ever met, or anybody, can tell you at that moment where they're just writing and they don't think
Yeah.
about it. They're not plotting. You're
Yeah.
not plotting. You're not writing. You just, it just fucking comes out.
Yeah.
Like it's perfect. And it's not just writing. It's with music too. I used to
Mm.
play in a band, and some of the best stuff we ever wrote, was during these like strange moments where like the ozone was right and the lightning outside was perfect, or something like that,
Uh,
or
yeah.
and the barometric pressure was at the right thing, and all five of us were just jamming, and something just came out that was like, we didn't even talk about it. It just
That's
happened.
That's the ecstatic experience of the whole thing, man. Like I've definitely had, a lot of writing process for me is like busy work, hoping that that moment happens. It's just
Mhm.
like I'll just get in this chair and I'll start typing away, and maybe if if I've been a good boy, maybe I'll get that moment for a
Right.
little while, and I'll get to crank out, 100 words that are good, and you go back and those things usually require the least amount of editing. They
Yeah.
usually, they kind of just you can almost just let them out as they came. Yeah,
Yeah. You write it
that's
in the
Because
the
heat.
yeah.
you look at like, and all the training you have, your education, your
Hmm.
practice in whatever art you're doing, that just prepares you to ride the lightning, basically. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean that the lightning will ever come or it
No,
will ever
no.
stay. You know what I mean? Because you can
Yeah.
have the best, I always said, like, somewhere right now in this country, somewhere in a basement or in a bedroom somewhere, the best technical guitar player lives, and
Yeah.
you're never going to meet him ever,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he has everything, and he can play every Jimi Hendrix song, and every Tony Iommi or whatever virtuoso guitar
Yeah.
song, with his eyes closed, blah blah blah, or whatever. But the lightning will never come for him. I know it's sad,
Yeah.
but it's just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the same thing in film. You have these movies with the $500 million budgets or whatever, and all
Right.
the greatest stars and the best equipment and stuff, and it just, a turd comes out. And then
Yeah.
sometimes you just have like 100 grand or something, and it's just like a bunch of dudes, and for some reason it just, there's a magic, there's something that happens, and you get a masterpiece that lives.
Yeah.
You literally just described Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Right, right,
That's
Yeah.
right.
literally what
Yeah.
it was. Few $100,000 and a bunch of idiots in the
Yeah.
woods. Don't
you
worry
know
about it.
Right. Right.
and
Right.
everything comes together. I mean, True Detective season one is a great example. You got these two
Yeah.
guys that the director and the writer, the showrunner, did not like each other at all. They argued the whole time, and the right actors were involved, and everything just came out
Hmm.
perfectly. The right environment, the right vibe, and it was just
Yeah.
luck. That's why it can never be recreated. That's why that own show can never recreate that one season, because
Yeah.
there was some kind of something there. There was like
Yeah.
a connection to a higher truth that was connected. I mean, look how many authors drop one or two fantastic pieces of work and then nothing.
And then nothing. Yeah.
Or how many
Yeah.
bands,
Yeah.
or how many, just musicians and stuff. It's just nothing. So I think that tarot cards are a tool, right?
Hmm.
They're a semiotic tool, and semiotics is the study of symbols, if you guys are not familiar, that allow you to, kind of think of things that you would not be thinking of and make
Mhm.
connections that are already there that you might not feel. In a way, the cards aren't really doing the fortune telling, or because it's not fortune
No.
telling, it's more like analyzing the environment, right? Or the
Yeah.
situations. It's not that they do anything specifically, is that the symbols are universal to Western
Right.
civilization, and
Yeah.
they trigger in you, they help you open up that connection to the overall symbolic world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I now use tarot very lightly for writing in that like the novel I just finished, the plot is basically four cards from the major arcana in a row because I came to recognize that that's a universal pattern. Those four, everybody has lived that those four cards in one way or another, right? And so, okay, like how can I use that the sort of causal relationship between those four to like come up with a plot? And it's like, it actually does work.
Right.
Yeah. But it's because it is like it's this old system and I'm always interested in it's kind of goes back to the mythology thing that we were talking about. It's like uh, if a story or a set of art or whatever has survived for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, there's a reason for that. And like you might not be able to point your finger exactly why it survived. And you might even be able to come up with like historical context and be like, well, that's why it's still around. But ultimately, it survives because there's something in it that we all want or we all recognize or all resonates with us,
Yeah.
And so you see that I see that in the tarot. It's like, oh, there's a reason why it's like, the first cards came out in the late 1300s, and yet we're still on a podcast kind of talking about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Funny
There's
you
It's why
say
we
that
something in
talk
there.
about it's why we talk about Shakespeare,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
his plays are filled with a baseline symbolism that
Hmm.
is still very pertinent to today, from
Hmm.
elements like the witches that are like almost as old as civilization itself. The three
Yeah.
witches, the there's always threesomes and things happen
Hmm.
specifically in the animal symbology and the storms and all, it's there. It's like you can take that story, that plot line and no symbols, and you can just change the outfit a million times.
Yeah.
But deep down, you're still hitting the same exact elements that are a universal constant. I mean,
Hmm.
talk about lightning. If there's one individual that, rode the lightning his whole career is that guy, whoever he may be.
Shakespeare? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Um,
I what you guys are describing makes me think of my school year, just to like bring in a different aspect, talking about, books and art and stuff like that. And I'm thinking about this year, my kids have fixated on the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul,
Oh yeah. It's
Venice,
beautiful.
and the Great Schism. And I don't, and those three things, they're all real, with the midterm we're doing this year, they're all real excited about those three subjects. And it's like, why? What's going on? Like, I don't
That's a
know. But those
That's
are
interesting.
those are
The
those are
Great
kind of
Schism is interesting for kids to latch onto. That's
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. No, we so I had my kids for the mid so I teach freshmen, and for the
Mhm.
midterm this year I had them create like a bunch of art and I got all this clay and markers and all kinds of stuff to create things with. And there are some they're 14, 15-year olds. They hardly know what they're doing, but
Mhm.
there were 4 or 5 bits that were made centered on the Great Schism. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
why do you guys the great split of the churches into East and West? And I don't know what that
Right.
is. I got to think about that though, because there's probably something in there.
There
Talking about
is.
symbols, there's a reason that it resonates, and a lot of it resonates is because we hammered on the Hagia Sophia for a while, and I went all
Mhm.
Oscar Spengler on it about the architects and the souls and like all this, and they got that. Like dude, it's amazing where you show them a picture of that building, and then I go, okay, guys, so then 1,000 years later, you get the Cologne Cathedral, and you also get Saint Basil's, and they're like,
Yeah.
what? What the
Right.
do you
hell
know? Do you know why?
happened?
Do you know why
They
they're
love
they're?
that.
You know why they're fixated on the schism?
Why's that?
Mm.
Because their parents are probably divorced,
Oh
Mm.
shit. I
right?
hadn't thought about that.
And
And the
the
church is your
America,
house. Your church
yeah.
is your house, and the church is
Division. Yeah.
split in half.
And America
Yeah,
feels like it's going through a schism
Right.
too.
yeah.
Yeah,
It might
yeah,
also click because I have a lot of Christians in my I have a lot of Christians in my class, and they probably go, "Oh, that's where all the different churches come from.
right.
That's where that
Yeah,
starts." Now all of a sudden, like shit starts to click.
Right.
yeah, because that nobody really like it is weird. I mean, I grew up Catholic and like nobody really ever, and I was confirmed. I went to catechism and all that, and
Yeah,
nobody ever took the time to be like, hey, here's why there's Lutherans. Like nobody ever,
yeah.
like nobody ever
Here's why
bothered
there's
to explain
Orthos.
it.
Here's why there's
Y-
here's why there's Methodist Church of blah 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 blah. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I don't mean in a like we're better than them way, just like
no,
literally
right.
historically, like
Yeah, what the hell?
why
What the hell?
why are we in this church and they're in that one? And
Ding
nobody
dong.
ever,
My name
yeah,
is Elder Smith. And then
right,
where the Mormons? Where are they coming from? What's going on?
Right.
right,
Which
right.
is
Yeah,
funny because like maybe once every 3 weeks at work we get into the topic of religion and basically what we're talking about right now, and somebody goes, I don't really understand the difference between like Protestants and like Roman
Mhm,
Catholics, and I'm like,
mhm.
well, guys, all right, let's get your coffee. We're gonna
I
have
just
a
pictured you puffing your
conversation.
chest out, man. I can
Uh,
visualize that.
I'm all like, I do a little
Uh,
stretch. I'm
All
like, all right, you guys
right,
are ready
well.
for a 2 hour lecture on this? Okay, cancel my appointments for the day. Okay, let's get.
Nurse, cancel my appointments.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. It's like, all right, everybody, come hither. Let me start with
Gather
the
round, children.
Council of Nicaea at the beginning.
Yeah, did you get like the incense and everything? And like
Yeah, incense. I bring my censer out, a few icons I put on the wall, and it's just we go from there. Let me tell you about the Orthodox Church, Eastern Orthodox
I'm
Church.
picturing you with one of the hats now. Oh God, this is the best day ever.
Yeah, and it goes on, but that talking about now we're talking about mainstream religion, and
Yeah,
it's interesting that you said you were you were born a Roman Catholic, I
yeah,
believe Fisto
Yeah,
also
same
mhm,
here. Yep,
same
yep,
here.
yep, yep.
I was baptized a Eastern Orthodox because I'm
okay,
Romanian, and but I grew up in a very atheistic family, very modern and very separated from but of course the traditions and everything kind of lived. They're part of the background radiation of life, um,
mhm,
but I I've always I would say I've recently returned to more mainstream religion, but even then I can't claim that I am a hardcore religious individual because I share a lot of interest in more esoteric and occult aspects of Christianity. Like, I don't know if you've ever read Meditations on the Tarot by Valentin
oh yeah,
Tomberg, right?
oh yeah. I have it sitting right next to me actually.
Right. So do
Yeah,
I, right? It's a it's
yeah.
a Hermetic text written by I believe he was a monk, or he wasn't a full monk,
He
but
was a sort of a strange guy.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I need to know more about him actually. But he definitely had associations with I don't know if it was the Eastern Orthodox or not,
Well,
actually.
he was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, and
Right,
he was baptized Eastern Orthodox, and then I think
right.
he kind of became an atheist. Later in life, he became a Roman Catholic,
Mm,
or maybe he was like a Protestant for a while, and then he went through the gamut. He
he did.
explored different things, and
Yeah. And
I
he had followers who thought he was a reincarnation of some figure from Buddhism, actually.
right,
Like
Oh
he's
gosh,
right,
we're
yeah.
and
just all of it.
He never claimed he was, but he had followers who thought that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then that book is fascinating. It's a bit of a tough one. It's not one I'm like,
Mhm.
here, you should read this one. It's like this is
Yeah.
level 3. Okay, you're
No,
gonna
that's dude. People ask me about what should I read on the tarot, and sometimes they bring that up, and they're just trying to step their toe in it. I'm like, no, that's the graduate thesis. Like you
yeah,
can read it, but like if you're just trying to like, what is the tarot?
That's paid
That is not.
subscriber. That's paid
Yeah, yeah,
subscriber.
that
You
is
got to
not the
relax.
book.
yeah. That's a little bit on. You got to read a little bit of. I mean, because it's ultimately a Christian text. It's a Christian
Hmm.
esoteric text, and it uses the tarot in a Christian framework, and also using a lot of the symbolism of the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox Church. And it gets confusing a little bit if you're not familiar with some of the core ideas. And you got to read like 200 years of philosophy to even get near any of that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
it's for schizos, guys.
It really is. I think I read it through twice, and then now I just kind of like pick and choose. Like I occasionally, like if I give myself a reading and a major arcana card shows up, I will go back and read that chapter. But there's still a lot of it that's over my head, to be honest.
Yeah, there's some things that are like you just don't bite on this apple yet, man.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's not time. Um, but I definitely, I it's interesting because you get attacked. I would guess criticized, maybe not attacked, but
Yeah.
criticized by factions on our internet world that would be like, "Oh my God, you're just a occultist, Satanist, or something
Yeah,
stupid like that."
I've been called a
Heresy,
witch. I've
heresy.
been called what's that Bible verse that's something like suffer not a witch or something like
Yeah,
that? I've been had that thrown at me a few times.
Nice.
Yeah,
right.
which is
And you're
fine.
just like, man, the, I'm an author, dude. That's why I'm a degenerate. I can't, like it's my
Yeah.
job to do this.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
you can't if you can't play with fire. I mean, it's gonna consume us
Yeah.
all, but you know,
Yeah.
some of us have to do it. Um,
Yeah.
and there's an element where like we've demysticized the universe. I don't know if you're
Hmm.
We've tried to.
Yeah.
we've tried to because we
Tried
can't
to.
truly do it, but we've done a really good
Yeah.
job of it. And I don't know if
Hmm.
Yeah.
you're a fan of Mircea Eliade, the
Oh
Romanian.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's my guy. Okay, he's
Hmm.
my guy that I'm obsessed with. I think he's probably, if I had to choose one figure that where I and then his main easiest book is one that I do recommend to everybody. And I'm probably gonna do a full like 10 episode podcast on that, like a schizoid reading of all those books, right? Um, but I think that we've demysticized the world, and we've actually demysticized religion itself in a way.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've made religion sterile and boring.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna throw. Okay, I'm gonna throw some shade here on our little Protestant friends. I'm sorry, guys, right? But I got invited. I think maybe a year ago, my wife got invited to go to church with a friend of hers, and she's like, "Oh, we should go. It might be fun. It might be interesting." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. I'll go. Okay, I'll commit some
Yeah.
heresy and go or whatever." Um, and I went. I went to a Protestant church, and I felt like I went to a Starbucks.
Yeah.
Right? It was
Yeah.
so sterile and so devoid of mystical energy or like just anything.
Yeah.
And they separated the kids from the adults, and the kids went to like a playground. They had everything. It was like a McDonald's playground. They had tubes and stuff, and there was a band, and they played bass, and like I was like, oh my
Ugh.
God, I hated it. Like, and I'm just like,
I feel
nah.
like I feel like this is where we bring in our obligatory Kaczynski reference of industrial society and its consequences. I mean,
It became commercial
yeah.
Christianity, devoid of
Yeah.
mysticism. And I've always been one of those guys that's like, oh God, I need the incense, man. I need the magic. I need I need I need that vibration that you feel when you walk into like a sacred place,
Hmm.
whether it's a
It's
Christian church or even a temple or a shrine. Like when I was in
Yeah.
Japan, I'd walk into these shrines sometimes on the top of a mountain somewhere, and you'd walk into this place and you're like, okay, I get it, you know?
yeah,
Hmm.
it's interesting to me. I'm thinking back to my own experiences, and I think of some of the, you know, Baptist churches I've been to and some of the Pentecostal churches I've been to, and anything that gets into like spiritualism or like mysticism, it's all so freaking noisy. And
Hmm.
that's great or whatever, but where's the like I remember stepping into some of the churches when I visited Poland and it's like, "Oh, holy shit. Okay."
Hmm.
And it's just
Yeah.
tall, imposing, shut the fuck up, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
there is
where is
something
that?
too. There is something too. Like I, and maybe this is just my tendency, but like there's just aesthetically, like there's a darkness missing. Like the wood isn't dark. Like you know what I mean? Like literally visually, there's this like
Mm,
everything should be a sort of a light gray drywall kind of thing.
yeah.
And it's just
Mauve for everyone. Sure.
yeah, no features and like the what I liked about the Catholic Church growing up, and I don't attend there anymore and don't really see myself as a Catholic other than sort of, I guess, ethnically almost. But there's like it was it was heavy. It was like
Yeah.
there were organ sounds and like and the wood was heavy and like
Heavy
there
like
was
a
a
rope.
certain there was a certain intensity to it. I mean, I think
No.
most American religion. Have you guys heard of this term Sheilaism?
No.
Yeah,
Like
so
Sheila the woman's name?
like the woman's name. Yeah, so
Oh
I
geez.
came
Okay.
across this recently. I was reading Harold Bloom's book, The American Religion, and he basically argues that all the American religions, like Mormonism and Southern Baptism and Seventh Day Adventism and all this, he basically argues that they're fundamentally Gnostic. And I don't really want to get. I wasn't really trying to get into that part of it, but he says that
Yeah.
basically the typical person who thinks of themselves as quote unquote religious is really practicing something like Sheilaism. And Sheilaism is comes from this other book called I think it's Habits of the Heart or Heart Habits from the 80s, in which you're talking about like basically religion in the Midwest. And they came across this woman who said that she believed in Sheilaism, which means you just kind of listen to the voice in your head
Oh no.
and that's you kind of just do what you think is
Mm.
right.
Right.
And most and that's not the worst piece of advice in the world, right? That's a
Yeah.
good starting point to like do what you think is right. But I think a lot of like American religion is basically that. And so you don't it doesn't end up having any there doesn't end up being any meat on the bones. It's like we're all gonna get here in this room and we all agree that we're doing what we think is right, right? Okay, cool. Let's sing a song and then we'll be back next Sunday.
Right.
It's
There's a lack of gravitas,
yeah,
and it's
There's no attachment to what you actually end up doing. You just
right.
say the right things, but you don't actually ever
Yeah.
do the right things.
there's
And
a
Yeah.
nobody ever
there's a
asks
level
either.
there's a
Right.
level of, like I said, in Mere Light, his most famous book, which I do recommend to everybody to read, it's The Sacred and the Profane, and he talks about
Mm.
the sacred and the profane. And when he said he uses the word the profane, it's not a good translation into English from Romanian, but the profane, when we say the word profane in English, we mean like an active kind of ruining of something, right? The
Hmm.
profane, a better word would be the sacred and the mundane, or the
Mm.
material,
Yeah, sure.
would be a better translation. And I think that that's what's missing in a lot of McDonald's churches in the United States, and why they're so susceptible to the latest fads, the Flanderisms of the Simpsons Flanderism of the religion, is that they lack the sacred, because there's no traditional connection to the axis mundi of the universe, because they're so topical, and
Mm.
by that is they can allow a level of the profane or the mundanity of like looking like a Starbucks, like an Apple store. And if your church is no different
Mhm.
than an Apple store, then it's just an Apple store,
Right. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and there is no sacred, and that's why your kids are going to become atheists and go away, and it's
Right.
just, there's a level. I'm not like a intra-denominational kind of guy. I think that any any religion, that is aimed towards the good and the true is worth pursuing, and
Mhm.
specifically every denomination. But I went to Bucharest recently, about a year ago, and I spent some time alone, just walking the streets, just, no GPS, nothing, just walking the streets using my memories from 30 something years ago. And
Wow.
I connected it to a level of, I don't know, I felt like I was in a sacred memory space, basically, because I moved from Bucharest when I was 6 years old, right? And I've never been back since then until last year. And I had memories of like walking down the streets with my parents and my grandmother. And I remembered in one park that my grandpa used to take me to, my grandpa who died over 30 years ago, right before I even moved to the US, there was a statue of Atlas, Atlas, the god, and he's holding the globe, and he's bent over, and it's in this rose garden off like the beaten path. And I was walking through the park with my uncle and my aunt, and I was like, no, no, there's a statue of Atlas here. I know where it is. He's like, how the hell do you remember this? Like, it's here. Like, I know how to get to it. And I got to it. I found it, right? And it was still there. There was some graffiti on the walls and kind of janky looking
Yeah.
compared to how I remembered it, but it was there. And I was like one of the most spiritual moments I've ever had in my life because I connected to my past that no longer existed. And I could walk through that
Mm.
city. It's been 30 years. It's modernized now. I left at the end of communism when there was barely any cars on the streets and now it's like Starbucks and McDonald's and it's now a big European city with millions of cars and Beamers and all kinds of stuff everywhere. And I could still remember the paths. And what's wild about that city is that there's all these old churches, and some of them are like 1,000 years old. They've been there since the
Yeah.
beginning, of that city, and they're built out of wood, and they're surrounded by this like skyscraper. But there's this little church, and you walk into it, and it feels like you are no longer in 2024. It's like you are transported to, I don't know, that time when it was built almost. And
Awesome.
they're
Yeah.
small, and some of them are even kind of dinky, and covered in like smoke, the candle smoke of 1,000 years. And it's oppressively mystical almost. I don't know, I don't know how to describe it. Like you feel like a thumb is pushing you down,
I love it.
I
and
I
Yeah.
keep
it's
I
wild.
keep I keep thinking about the geography of North America as we have this discussion,
Right.
and
Mhm.
perhaps we shouldn't be too harsh on American spirituality
I'm,
simply
I'm not
because,
actually. I support
yeah,
American spirituality.
yeah, no, I mean, of
Mhm.
course, but like I think to myself, the Romanian church that you're describing, you know, there is no chance for something like that to really exist here yet.
Right.
Anything that did exist like that here probably got bulldozed, or
Yeah.
is part of a national park. And I
Mhm.
think, I keep thinking of John Muir and the Sierra Nevada and out west. And for me, the most spiritual I've felt are in the natural cathedrals that litter, for lack of a better word, North America. Like I think about
Mhm.
living out in Colorado. I think about going to the Grand Canyon. I think about, growing up on the shores of Lake Erie. I think about seeing the Mississippi River for the first time, and it's just you felt the oppressive thumb of something much larger than you, and it's just wow, cool. That's amazing.
Absolutely. I think the Grand Canyon like brought a tear to mind when I
Phew.
first saw it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
A- And you know what? I climbed Mount Fuji, and I climbed Mount Fuji in the middle.
I still love that story, by the way.
I climbed Mount Fuji in the middle of the night. Okay, I'm gonna keep the
Whoa.
other part of the story. And if you do the Mount Fuji experience correctly, right, the way the monks do it, is you start off at the base of Mount Fuji at like 7 p.m. All right, so
Mm.
you spend all day in Tokyo. That's what we usually did, and we hopped on a bus and we drove to Mount Fuji, and it was one of the lower stations. And you hung out for a little bit, and then they opened like the gate to the path that like ascends the mountain, and you
Mhm.
just go and you start at 7 p.m. and if you're keeping a monk's pace, and those guys, man, those guys are fast, I'm not gonna lie. Those 80-year-old Japanese like Shinto monks, they're not fucking around. Okay, they're right. And you climb the mountain starting at 7 p.m. and you get to the top as the sun rises,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
above the world. You're basically living in the Japanese flag, basically.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful experience, right? And
We
I
did a Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no,
I
and
was gonna say we did a similar thing on Mount Kilimanjaro. You leave in the middle of the night so you can get there right at the peak, right at sunrise.
right, and
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
other like
What's up with the
these
mountains, man? What's up
freestanding
with
these
the mountains?
freestanding mountains, these freestanding mountains. Well, okay, I'll get back to the mountain, right? But
Yeah.
the um the way I felt was great. I thought it was amazing. I've got a picture of me standing on top of this mountain and above the clouds. And when we were driving across the country, moving to South Carolina. My wife insisted that we go to the Grand Canyon. She's like, "We're gonna go to the Grand Canyon. We're staying in 2 nights in Flagstaff. We're gonna drive up to the fucking Grand Canyon, right?" She like insisted on it, right? I
Mm.
was like, "Oh no, it's just a fucking hole. I don't know if I want to see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's go to like
This
Taos,
guy.
Arizona instead or
This
something like that,
guy.
right?" And I went. She won out like she always does, right? And it blew me away. The Grand Canyon is a lot more. I felt a lot more connection to the majesty of it than I did on Mount Fuji, which I didn't expect
Mm.
that. And I think maybe because the Grand Canyon is mine, it's my adopted country's you know,
Right.
land, and it really like affected me. I was like, wow, like
Yeah.
here I
I feel
was
that
with,
way. Sorry, go ahead.
well, I was traveling across the country with all our possessions in the back of our RAV4, including my dog and my 3-year-old daughter at the time, and I was doing kind of a reverse Oregon Trail, basically going from California back east, for the first time for me, and seeing the country. Because what we did was we took the slow way back down. We
Yeah.
basically stopped everywhere and spent the night almost everywhere, and we really wanted to experience the United States. And I'm still paying for it, by the way. I'm broke, but uh, like I really it was a very emotional experience for me, and it's I think about it like all the time,
Yeah,
and
traveling across the United States like that. When I was young, we took several trips out west, and one year involved the train, and then we drove down to the Grand Canyon, and then I've moved across the country several times um, by automobile. It just doesn't fucking stop. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
God, like
That's
I've driven
that's
how
the
many days, and I'm still just,
dude.
what is this
That's
place?
that's the American pilgrimage, in my
Yeah,
opinion. It's
man.
like pretty
Oh
much
yeah.
going coast to coast. You don't have to
Yep.
be exactly coast to coast
Yeah.
necessarily, but
Yeah.
like pretty much traversing the whole the whole
Yeah.
continent.
You
That
got to
is
do it.
like,
You got to go.
yeah, yeah. Because
well,
you won't really understand America until you do that on some level, I don't think.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you know what? Even me who grew up in the United States, I did not have a good perspective of the United States until I did this trip, as a 39-year-old. And it was so interesting because I have European family members and European friends, and they don't have the goddamn faintest idea how big the United States
Oh
is,
no. People have no idea. People have
Like
no
Yeah,
idea.
if you spend time in Europe and interact with Europeans, they have no fucking clue how big the United States is, right?
They
Because in
don't.
Europe, my cousin lives in England, and she goes back to Bucharest like, oh, she's like, we had like a little family reunion when I went, and she like messaged me. She's like, oh, I'll be there in a few hours, you know, and then I
yeah.
picked her up at the airport with an Uber like 4 hours later, and she came out. She's, oh yeah, I was at work this morning, blah blah blah. It was like a trip from like London to Bucharest was like a trip from like here to Charleston for me, or from like here to Florida. It was like, oh, I'll be there in a few hours. Okay, I'll see you, and I got
Yeah.
it back to work on Monday. But you cross the United States, it's a fucking week and a half long drive if you're driving at a
Uh,
normal pace,
uh, oh
Uh,
yeah,
one of my
dude.
one of my
I
dreams is to grab one of the Euros Substacks, and like get them down here to Florida. Be like, get in the goddamn car. What? Just get in
yeah,
the goddamn,
yeah.
and then
We're
we're going to Washington. Deal with it. Like
yeah, right.
talk to me in 3 weeks. And
Oh
then we'll
man.
wait about it, and then try not to murder each other.
Well,
Yeah. I
who did that, right?
Mm,
Baudrillard did that. He wrote
hmm
a whole
mm.
book about him coming to America and traveling across the country, and it's a
Yeah.
great little. It's called America.
Yeah. I've been fortunate enough to do it a bunch of times. I mean, so I grew up in Michigan and my folks drove us out to Yellowstone when I was a kid,
Oh,
and then
hell
another
yeah.
trip drove us to Maine. And then
Yeah, I lived
I'm
there for a while.
all right, yeah, it's beautiful. And
Yeah,
then
man.
when I got out of college, well, when I was in high school, I took a train to New Mexico in the Boy
Mm.
Scouts for a backpacking trip, and then a recurrent sort of theme is driving across the country. I mean, I moved to Idaho from Michigan. I drove out there. I took a bus from Portland, Oregon to New York City.
Ah,
I took a Greyhound. It's like
perfect.
67 hours or something like that.
Perfect.
And you don't go through very many of the big cities. You go through like a
No.
lot of little podunk towns and stuff. And it's like, and there's, some of the remaining adventure of the world you can kind of find there. It's just like got to Omaha and I fell asleep in a McDonald's and missed my connecting bus. So like all of a sudden I'm just spending the night in Omaha apparently. Like
There's a
just
there's
cool.
a there's a there's a rest station in Iowa that's got a bicycle that I left there years ago
Yeah.
because it was about to fall off the car, so we pull
Yeah,
off the side
just
of the road and
throw
just
it
throw
off.
it in there and like head out. So
Yeah.
so there's I don't know whatever happened to that bike. I'd like to think it's still there waiting.
Well,
Yeah, I had a road trip with a bunch of friends of mine when I was like 19. We drove from Detroit to San Francisco, and I remember we slept in a rest stop in Nebraska. We slept on the picnic tables, and years later on my bus trip going back the other direction, um, the bus stopped at that rest stop. And
Oh,
it
that's
took me
awesome.
like, I was standing there smoking a cigarette, and it took me like 5 minutes to be like, I've been here
Yeah.
before.
Oh,
Because
so
you're in the middle of nowhere, literally like middle of nowhere, Nebraska. I'm saying, like, I've been here before. How did, trying to make that connection. And then, like,
that vague sense of
yeah,
the fuck?
Well, and
right.
that right there is the spirituality of America. I mean, there's a
It
reason
Yeah.
why
is.
the road trip novel or movie, you talk about the beats, right? I mean, probably the
Hmm.
most famous beat novel is the road trip one,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's such a critical part of the American identity, this movement, this going west,
Mhm.
this going to fucking Mars, like
Yeah. And it
it's
definitely, I mean, it goes back to like manifest de like it's not a tradition just on based on the car. The road trip with the car is like just
Yeah.
the latest iteration of it, right?
Yeah.
It goes
right.
back to like
100%. Yeah.
horse and buggy. We're landing in New York and we're gonna take our family west because there's some promise out there that we might get a piece of land,
Right, there might
you
be
know?
something good out there, and there might be
Yeah.
monsters out there too, but we're gonna
Right.
go
Right.
anyways. We're gonna go
Yeah.
anyways. And
Yeah.
that's such an interesting, like, unique part of, American like fiction. I mean, the I've always said that, you know, if the Europeans have Lord of the Rings and the great myths as their in the fairy tales as the knights and the princesses as their fundamental mythology, the Americans have the West, the Western.
Yeah.
The Western is the American fairy tale. Um,
Yes.
and it's a critical part. I mean, and look, I'm gonna throw some pride towards my recently adopted world. There's a fucking reason why some of the best American writers are from the South,
Yeah.
the Faulkner and the McCarthys and stuff, because they're the Southerners and Southwesterners that went west,
Mhm.
and that's why the environment plays such a significant role in some of our best novels. Even Moby Dick is ultimately an American Western novel if you really want to be,
Yeah. Yeah,
truthful about it.
in a sort of fascinating. I literally just finished reading that not long ago, and new podcast I'm going to be doing. A first episode's going to be have to do with Moby Dick, and it is strange. It's like this. It's a totally American book. Half the characters aren't Americans, and very little of the book takes place in America. But like, it is it's like a recapitulation of this thing you're talking about, of like the pursuit of something that's out there, right?
Right.
It could be fortune and it could be disaster. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
did you find it? So I recently read it about 2 years ago for the first time myself.
Yeah.
And you know what shocked me about it is that it's fucking funny.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. It's hilarious. Yeah.
It, it's billed or it's described often as kind of a hard, dry novel, and there is some
Yeah.
hard, dry parts to it.
Mhm.
But I found it hilarious. Like he's a total shitlord,
Yes. Yes.
Ishmael.
Yeah.
Dude is
Yeah.
like he's a Substack poster. He's Fisto basically. The guy's the novel starts off with the guy
uh,
going, "Yeah, I was just bored with everything, so I decided to,
Yep.
like, I don't know, walk around and get drunk, and
yeah, I
Yeah.
decided
I ended
to
up
sign up
whaling."
to a Substack and
Well,
start
well,
shit posting
well,
people.
but he has this moment where he's like, "Yeah, I figured I better go whaling or else I might kill myself." Ha ha ha.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah,
like, "Wait, was he really gonna kill himself, or did he like and it's very that part of it's very tongue in cheek." Yeah,
right. And
yeah,
he's like,
yeah,
"Yeah,
the
I was
whole
just wandering around getting drunk, thinking about killing
yeah,
myself, and I ended up
right,
like sharing a bed with this like cannibal dude, and we
right,
were smoking shit out of his pipe. And it was like, and then we were on a
yeah,
ship, and
right.
it's hilariously written, and there's so
It
much
is.
to it, and people criticize the one of the main criticism towards it is the whaling chapters, the
Yeah.
detailed, almost like dictionary style encyclopedic whaling terminology and stories. But
Mhm.
I find those fascinating because I think that they are critical to the novel itself because they're
Mhm.
boring and they're supposed to be boring,
Yeah.
right? They're
And
supposed to
and
set the
they're Yeah, they are, but they're not all boring.
No,
Like
they're not. They're not.
the whiteness of the whale chapter is a friggin' masterpiece, man. Like
Agreed.
he's somehow managed to like he literally he managed to like take the whale and write somehow extrapolate it out into a, whatever it is, 10 pages, 12 pages piece that could stand on its own that is somehow about everything. It's like the the history of the universe, including human consciousness, is somehow caught up in his metaphor of the whiteness of the whale. It's masterful. But if you don't, if you just like flip to it and you're like, oh, another thing about, another encyclopedia entry about whales,
Goddamn whales.
you're not gonna like it's not gonna stick for you. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean it's stuck for me because every now and then
yeah,
people mention whales. I'm like, well, let me tell you about the
right,
sperm whale,
right,
okay?
right.
So inside its fucking skull, it's got this thing called.
Hold on.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
talk about the whales. We got to get the
The,
robes and the
All right,
incense, and it's a
cancel my
2 hour
patience.
lecture.
Cancel my
Cancel my
patience
patience.
again. Happens
We're gonna
once a
talk
week,
about we're
guys.
gonna talk about whales or the Orthodox Church. All right, we're
Yeah.
canceling everything. Here we go.
It's like God. I don't know how my clinic manager puts up with me. She's like, God bless her. She's like 22 years old and she
Like once,
has the
God damn with
patience.
the
Yeah.
whales. God forbid anyone ever brings up Orthodox whales.
Yeah.
We'll
Orthodox
never
whales.
open again. We'll
Yeah.
start a new church, the Ortho Whale Church. Here we
Yeah.
go.
Let me tell
Forget
you about
about it.
Jonah and the whale real fast. And they're like, oh man.
Make whaling great again. The guy's gonna move to Japan. He's never gonna come back. He's just
Yeah.
gonna whale forever.
Alex is going on again, on and on about this stuff again. But
Goddamn whales on Mount Fuji. I just
yeah.
can't with this.
But I do recommend Moby Dick for readers at home. It
Oh,
is
it's
a
so good.
fantastic novel. I mean, and if you like Blood Meridian is Moby Dick.
Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't, I tried to read Moby Dick in my early 20s and I mostly bounced off of it, to be honest. And I read it now and it's well, Blood Meridian is totally a riff on it. I mean, there's a lot, not only a lot of similar characters, but just like straight up tropes and
Isn't that
literary techniques and moves are taken right
Yeah.
from it.
isn't
Yeah.
that funny? Like when you reread something, it's like, dang, can I can I bring down the level of the podcast for a second? Can I kind of
Sure.
get a little
Yeah.
maybe midbrow here? I had
Yeah.
the best experience I've had with this personally lately is I reread Starship Troopers over the summer, and in high school I didn't get any of it, and now that I'm a little older and I reread it and I go, holy fuck, I'm Mr. Dubois, I'm that guy, I'm that social studies teacher. Okay, all right, you know what? Fine, so be it. Citizenship, guaranteed, serve it, whatever. Let's do it. I don't even care anymore.
Yeah.
What? It's comical. It's hilarious because it's humbling. It's so humbling.
Well,
Mm.
that
You think back to when you were young and you're just like, I was such a fucking moron. Jesus
Oh
Christ.
yeah. Oh
I mean,
yeah.
and it's just okay, fine, sure, all right. At least I
I
understand that now.
Honestly, I mean, I got a bachelor's of English and I went and got an MFA and I don't think I really learned how to read until the last semester of my master's program.
Yeah.
Something clicked and I was like, "Oh, you got to pay." And I couldn't even really articulate what the difference was to you, but I remember there was like a moment where I was like, "Oh, you got to look at it like this." Like, and it's like I don't know why it took that much. I was re obsessive reader. At that point I'd
Yeah.
read however hundreds of books, and gotten A's for writing
Yeah.
my analysis of them. And yet something I'm still learning, I'm still getting, I feel like I'm still
The
learning
veil
how
is
to read,
pierced.
but
The veil
yeah,
was
that was a
pierced.
moment.
Well,
Yeah.
and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where I think great literature can speak to you through time and different
Hmm.
phases of your life, because
Yeah.
ultimately great literature taps into that semiotic like consciousness, right? That Jungian subconsciousness, and you might get the text and you might get the symbols put into your brain, as you're reading them, but if you don't have the proper decoder ring built into your brain yet.
Yeah.
That often comes with age and experience. It
Yep.
just won't
That's all
click.
it is.
Parts will click,
100%.
but not all of
Yeah.
it will click. Because yeah, when I
Yeah.
read Starship Troopers for the first time, yeah, I was the Filipino boy from like Brazil or wherever, right? That's the main character, right? He's a little Filipino kid or something
I
like
got
that.
to read this book.
No,
I
no,
never
no.
read it.
He's Brazilian from Rio. He's from Rio.
But I thought he was Filipino. I thought he
No, no,
was
no.
like
Brazilian.
okay. I might
I
have.
don't
See,
I don't
I
think
don't
he's
remember.
Filipino. No,
I'm gonna have to review that. Um,
maybe. It's a great Brad. I make a joke with making a little lowbrow, but no,
Yeah.
it's a
It's not.
fantastic book.
I Yeah, I
In
like
so much,
Heinlein. I've
yeah,
read
yeah.
Stranger in a Strange Land, and yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, look, like earlier we were talking about like who starts tropes and this and that. Military science fiction, that's the granddaddy right there. Like
Okay, yeah.
everything and the way he tells the story and how it builds up to the end and the final reference, I'm just like, Heinlein, you son of a bitch. Like it's gonna bring me to tears just talking about it. It's so good.
I
It's
love it.
so fucking good.
I love
It's
it. Oh,
Great.
it
short.
goes on the
It's a
list.
quick one.
It's
I
short
read it.
too. Yeah.
You can read it in one day. I think I read it in one day, like in between patrols in Afghanistan, because
Yeah.
it was for the longest time. I don't know if it still is, but it was part of like the Commandant of the Marine Corps' recommended books. So it was like
Yeah.
laying
Of course
Really?
around
it would be.
everywhere. It was laying
Oh yeah,
around
of course.
everywhere. Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
like there was when I was on this rinky dinky ass patrol base in Afghanistan. There was just people would send books, like care packages and stuff, and they would send books. And we had this little tent that just had books, and people were sending like a lot of used books, obviously from like bookstores and stuff. And there's a lot of weird, cool stuff. And I was like, oh well, shit, I'll pick this up. Like there was a collection of like old, like kind of like pulp magazines from like the new wave pulp era from the '70s, like Orbit and
Nice.
stuff. And it had all these great like, I mean, they're probably worth money now if I would have taken them home with me, but I'm not carrying that stuff with me. But
Yeah.
um,
I wonder if what we're describing is the experience of the prodigal son. Goes out, lives life,
Mhm.
comes back home and gets it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There is
That
definitely
story
something to that.
that story's been, I've joked with Alex. I've recently come back to Catholicism and I tell
Mm.
Alex I've been on the prodigal arc for probably about 15 years now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like that joke. It's like we were saying earlier, the knowledge is back there in the back of your head, like it's just waiting for you to get it. And
Hmm.
it'll wait. But maybe that's what we're describing. I don't know. But
well,
anyway.
I mean, yeah, I mean, fuck, man. I could tell you stories about my kind of return,
Yeah.
but I'll save that for a different podcast because I don't want to
Yeah.
be burnt
Yeah.
at the stake.
It's funny how it all
Um,
works.
but yeah, I mean that's the power of art and literature. I think that
Yes.
we can
Indeed.
Yeah.
talk about these symbols and these kind of universal truths, and we share a connection just by talking about these novels. There's just like this
Mhm.
level of excitement that, like, just talking about Moby Dick right now. I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. I see that cannibal. Old
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
pronounce his name, Queequeg or whatever.
Queequeg, yeah. I mean, dude, that's 100 and whatever, 170 years ago that book was written, and you
Right.
read it and it's like, yeah, it still speaks.
We're
Like I still resonate
we're
with
s-
it.
we're sitting here doing the Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. I mean,
Right. That's
that's what we're
exactly what
doing.
we're doing. Right. That is exactly
Love
what we're
it.
doing.
So
All
good.
right. So I'm gonna change topics real fast as we near the end. Okay.
Right
So
on.
Here we go.
we'll take it to the contemporary, Brad. Any
Yeah.
recent novels or films that you've read and liked and enjoyed and found interesting besides Moby Dick?
Yeah, well, I don't read a ton of like recent stuff that's come out, to be honest. I mean, I occasionally read stuff from internet friends, books from internet friends. And on that front, I can totally recommend Andrew Edwards' book, King of Dogs. Definitely check it out. It's like I mean, on the sort of surface of it, it's sort of like a survival action book, but it's got some real depth to it. Very smartly written, very beautiful. Um, I recently read I can never say the title and I'm going to say it wrong. Omisville by Ernst Junge. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that at all.
Oh, I
Um,
mean,
Oh,
welcome to
yeah.
the Younger Appreciation
Hey.
podcast.
okay, good.
Yeah, yeah, you're coming on the younger episode. We're going to talk
Okay.
about that book. Yeah, we're talking
Yeah,
about that one.
we're gonna do a
Oh
Younger
yeah.
Oh, dude, I
Oh,
just
cool.
finished that book. I just finished
Oh,
it.
really? Oh, it's
Yeah.
so good, man. It's
Oh,
so
it
good.
slayed me. It's life changing, life changing.
Yeah. Yeah. It,
Such a good
it
book.
he's got this like there's a certain Junge and he's at his best in this book, in my opinion, from what I've read. And he's that guy, he lived to be 100 and whatever, and half of the stuff's not even
187,000 years old or
translated.
whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
the man lived. You
Yeah,
know,
he
My God,
definitely
yeah, he
did.
did. Despite his
And
best efforts.
yeah, right, right, right. But like there's a certain audacity he has in this
Yeah,
Omisville where it's like he's not even gonna like pretend like there's almost no plot. There is a plot, but like it kind of doesn't matter. Um,
yeah.
there's a way in which it's not even really a novel. It's
It's
what
a diary.
it's kind of a diary. It just
Yeah.
happens to be a fictional character's diary. But
Yeah.
man, the sort of philosophical places that he goes, and not in a dry, like, this is what
No.
Heidegger had to say, but in a
No.
like actual lived sort of living philosophy, leveraging some wonderful poetry.
I
And
I
I wish
I
I could read German. Yeah.
I had this sense the last like 4 or 5 chapters are just all payoff. It's
Yeah.
just all
Yes.
just it's almost tantric right up until the
Hmm.
last 4 chapters, and then it's just fucking, oh my God, this
Yeah.
guy, jeez, my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah,
I was reading it.
100%.
I was reading most of it on a flight, and like I have it. I've transitioned to an ebook, and I resisted it forever, but now I have an ebook, and I have like 100 books on this thing, and I'm reading it, and I literally, as you're saying, like the last whatever 4 or 5 chapters, I'm like, I kept setting the book down and going, Jesus Christ.
Yes.
It's just
Yes.
like
I had time where I would read a chapter, or I'd get through, like, because he has these parts of the book where he just hammers it. It's like
yeah,
build up, build up, build, and then he just comes out of nowhere with a haymaker that lays you out. And I put the
yes,
book down for weeks. I'm just gonna think about that. I'm just gonna walk away and just kind of let that marinate. I had
yeah,
to. I
yeah,
had to.
yeah.
You can't just one does not simply read this cover to cover walking into Mordor. Like,
Right.
No, no.
It's not a novel that like you
yeah.
can just power through,
No.
it's one that you have to like savor.
Yeah, you gotta
Yeah.
walk away. Like, you gotta plan out the books you're gonna read when you're taking a break. You know?
Yeah, yeah. And I've got so many
Oh,
highlights, like I kind of just
yeah.
want to go back through and just like at least like read
That yes.
those, you know.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What? Get out of my head, man. Come on. What the?
Yeah.
No, look. I want to go back. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna give it some time, but I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go read through, and I'm gonna highlight every reference I don't understand, and then I'm gonna
Right.
go back through and research every reference. I mean, let's reconvene the podcast in 15 years and see how we did. That's where I'm at with this thing.
It's like
Oh,
55-year-old Fisto.
yeah, right.
Yeah, there you go.
How has your life of being an anarch in the forest been?
Nurse, cancel my appointments. I'm talking about younger with Fisto. Sir, this is a retirement home. You don't have a nurse
Right.
anymore.
Sir, this is a
Or
You're
retirement
75.
home.
Alex and Fisto, you're 75 years old shitting in a bucket. Can you
Yeah.
just
Right, right.
You are
Yeah,
not an anarch anymore.
I know you're an anarch and all, but
I
like
know you're a
take your
big
meds.
podcaster, but
Yeah.
it's time to take your medicine.
Psh, come on. I'm never going to a nursing home. I'll
Yeah.
walk,
In the South,
I'll walk
that's
into
us.
the
We're
I'll
dying in the
walk into
saddle.
the swamp of South Carolina before I go into a nursing home.
Attaboy.
Okay?
Yeah,
Attaboy.
I
Attaboy.
vibe with that.
Never doing
Dying
that.
in the saddle. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
But have you ever read Murakami at all?
I've read IQ 84. Is that what
Yeah,
it's called?
that's it. Yeah, IQ 84 or
1Q or IQ? One. Yeah.
It's like
I did
19
read that.
It's actually 1984, I think. I think it's just a play on Japanese kanji. 'Cause
Okay. Yeah,
I think the kanji for Q and like 9 or whatever is like the
they're
same
kind of the
or
same.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I read that, and I read oh God, it was years ago. Wind Up Bird Chronicle.
That's what I'm reading right now. I'm almost done
Okay.
with it, and it's just
Yeah.
the reason I ask is because he's such a, his themes are always dreams, and Wind Up
Mhm.
Bird is just a giant fucking dream. You're like,
Yeah.
is this real? Is this not real?
Yeah.
It's like a
Yeah.
Japanese Twin Peaks, basically.
Yeah, I remember loving it, but it's like one of those things. Some books fade. I couldn't tell you a lot of specifics about it,
You
but
know,
I do remember enjoying it. But
what's
it's funny
interesting?
that now his newest book, he's like his latest book that's coming out. Somebody is I don't know. There was sort of a joke on Twitter about it. It's like the reviews are like it has everything. It's like jazz, Beatles, and like three other things. People are like, yeah, that's what he's been writing about the whole fucking time. Like, what do you
Right.
mean?
I mean, the guy literally. I was at Barnes and Noble yesterday, and I picked
Yeah.
up a short story collection, his collection, Men Without Women, and my wife's looking. She's like, "These are all fucking Beatles songs," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Every title in this
Yeah.
collection is a Beatles song," and I picked up that book because the first story in that collection is Drive My Car, which was Japanese movie that was made like 3 years ago, and
Oh,
it's a 3-hour movie, right? It's a great movie.
wow.
but it is a Japanese movie. You know, Japanese
Well, sorry,
movies,
it's based on this story,
it's
or it
based on
just
the
has the same
story.
title.
It's
Okay.
based on the story, right? And I mean, it once again hits everything. There's jazz, there's a European car
Yeah.
fascination, there's a guy whose wife disappears or leaves him or dies. I can't remember exactly. But once again, as I'm reading Murakami, I'm thinking, you know what? I read some of his stuff when I was younger, and it didn't hit with me. I was like, oh, this is stupid, you know? But it hit a lot harder now because it deals with like aging and divorce and adult shit that a 22-year-old just does not vibe with, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Right.
wistfulness. And I love Japanese fiction, right?
Mm.
I'm a weeb non-weeb, okay? Because I don't particularly enjoy like I don't enjoy internet Japan. I don't enjoy
Mm.
anime and any of that stuff. Well, I mean, I don't have a beef against it. There's some good stuff. I don't
Mhm.
really enjoy that, but I do enjoy the artistic side of Japan and
Mm.
the classical side. And in Japanese artistic culture, um, they have this concept called wabi sabi, right? And I'm
Mm.
probably pronouncing it improperly, but the idea of it is that it's impermanence, right? The
Mm.
Japanese, their spiritual soul is obsessed with the idea of impermanence, right? So you live in Japan, they every like season, every few weeks, right? They replant all their flowers and they have seasons for each flower and they make a big fucking deal about it, right? It's like, oh, it's carnation season, you know? And everybody goes and oohs and ahs at the beautiful flowers, you know? And then they're dead.
Yeah. And then they're
And
dead.
the most important one is, the cherry blossoms. And the cherry blossoms like only happen in spring in certain climate and it only lasts a week. And it's such a big deal when all the trees just explode in just pure beauty, but it's such a sad beauty because you know it's going to blow, away
Mm.
in a few days,
Mhm.
and then you're
Mm.
walking through this park like by my house and I'm just surrounded by these lanterns, shooting light on these beautiful cherry trees. And it's like one of those samurai movies where it's like raining petals, and
Mhm.
the next day you go there and the wind comes and the rain comes and it's all gone. It's all on the ground. It's all mud.
Yeah.
And there's so much of their culture is focused on this impermanence and imperfection, this temporal
Mhm.
kind of movement, to where they treasure like old stuff that's like wood that's tarnished, or metal pots and stuff that are tarnished. And there's something I there's a wistfulness, like like a sadness to everything they do that I really I feel like I feel it, and we feel
Mm.
the same way when we experience nature, like, like the Grand Canyon of like, this is not going to be here forever, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just this interesting, or like in a very Christian kind of mindset is that I'm not here forever and I'm not even meant to be here in the first place, and I'm only
Mhm.
here temporarily and I'm going to enjoy these glimpses of beauty and truth for, even if it's just a second, I'm going to enjoy it. And I feel like so much of our world has profaned that concept with our materialistic kind of mundanity, where we don't
Mhm.
notice those little moments of, your kids smiling, or that moment where your first child is born and you see them for the very first second, it just seared into your mind. And it's only a second that they're newborn. It's
Yeah.
the second you pick them up or the nurse picks them up, it's over. But that very
Yeah.
first second, that first breath, you're like, fuck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think there can be, and I'm not like trying to like criticize American culture too intensely or broadly, but there can be, I think, a tendency in America to like pretend we can permanently capture these things.
Right.
It's like that's why you see the cell phones at concerts, right? Everybody's like recording, videoing the entire concert for some reason. Like
While
that's
not
gonna
not enjoying
somehow
it. Just put the fucking
not
phone down and
actually
enjoy.
right. You're like missing the thing because you think you're gonna somehow set it in stone, and that's not gonna happen. You're and then you're never gonna watch that
No,
anyway.
never,
Like,
never.
yeah. I think we do have this kind of delude. I was thinking about this the other day, and not to just like talk about tweets I had, but I did tweet it where it's like I realized the other day that um the best song, and I don't like saying best, but I think if I were to say what was the most moved I was by music was around a campfire. This woman, I didn't really know her. She was like a friend of a friend. I don't even know her name. I couldn't get in touch with her if I wanted to. Somehow, in the course of the evening, it was decided she was going to sing this song that she'd written. She didn't have an instrument or anything. And, if you hear that, like, if you're hanging out and somebody you're hanging out with is like, "Hey, can I sing you a song?" You're gonna be like, "Oh, geez, all right."
Right. You're like, oh my God.
Like, all right,
Right.
I'm gonna have to grin and nod through this, right? And, I'm not gonna try and recreate the song by any means, but she started singing, and about halfway through, I was like holding back tears, and not necessarily sad tears, but not even not sad tears. Like it was
Yeah.
incredibly moving, and I
Yeah.
will never hear that song again. There's like, if I do, it's like lottery chances. There's no way. Like she's not even really like a person. She's not even like a person who like goes and performs music. She just decided to write this song and she had a beautiful voice. And I just think about that a lot. Or like, man, I could spend the rest of my life digging through records and finding the oldest, coolest, weirdest stuff. And I don't know if I'll ever come across anything that's been put on tape or on CD or whatever that is gonna hit me like that hit me.
Right. Usually
You
like
know.
haunted by it forever. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a great story, man. Like that does capture, I guess, the truth of like the power of sitting around a campfire, which is pretty
Yeah.
much your prototype. That's where stories come from, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Human
Like that.
baseline right
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's going back to the old school. Man,
Yeah.
that's actually a great story. Like
Yeah.
that makes me think a lot
Hmm.
about, Mark Fisher's like the idea of hauntology and how we've
Hmm.
digitized all our media and we're basically
Hmm.
beating, digital ghosts over and over and over for all
Yeah.
Yeah,
eternity.
I'm trying to think of something comparable for my own self. I don't think of anything that like stands out right away because I'm trying to limit it to live music.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Actually, no.
I've seen a lot of like great concerts I've gone to, and those have been great. And similarly, but like
There
something
was
about this particular one. Yeah. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
no, I remember now. I remember now. Back in the early 2000s, I was in college and I got to see David Byrne play. And this is when he was doing
Oh,
his
yeah.
solo thing. Yeah. I don't even remember the song. I can't remember the song, but I remember the timbre of his voice. And after this particular song, I remember the crowd roared for 10 minutes straight. They wouldn't let the band continue.
Oh, that's
They
cool.
would not stop. And Byrne just sat there like he was clearly like humbled by it. And he just was like, okay. He just he let the crowd have it out. And I remember
That's
the feeling
awesome.
of this. It was like being in a cathedral, the sound of the song and then the crowd appreciation after. I it's it was church. It was church. That's
And
the
Yeah.
best way I can say
you
it.
can never
I'll never
recreate
see that
it.
again.
You never,
That'll never happen again.
you know,
Not like
I
that.
I remember the first time I randomly went to one of the best concert venues in the country, which is the Coliseum in Los Angeles, because it's set up like an old Greek Coliseum. And I saw Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and I was like, oh, I'll go, whatever.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was this amazing concert. I don't know what. I just they just were on fire that day. It was
Yeah.
like, and I've actually like I was obsessed with recreating that experience. And I went and saw him twice, two more times. I saw him with Crosby with Young, and I saw. And it didn't click. There was something about that night, that specific day, that was just perfect. It was like me and a close friend of mine, and we drove all the way to Los Angeles from Orange County, and it was just I can't recreate it.
Yeah.
But you know, uh, Mircea Eliade talks about the idea of time, right, and how time
Hmm.
itself can be sacred and profane, and
Hmm.
he says that for the most part, we live in profane time, and time that we don't pay attention to, it just passes. Like you get up in the morning, you shower, brush your teeth or whatever, eat a bagel, and drive to work, and you stop at the gas station, and you don't even register that time. It's nonsensical time. But
Hmm.
every now and then throughout your life, you hit these moments where you enter into like sacred time. And
Hmm.
it's the moments like, when you first see your child for the first time, or what you described with the music, or, those moments where you hang out in your bedroom with that girl you like had a crush on for 5 years, or whatever, and it
Yeah.
feels like you're there for a year, it feels like amazing. It's like the best time of your life, and you'll remember that
Mhm.
forever. And that's we kind of stumble into it. We stumble into
Yeah.
this sacred time, and I think that when we write or create, we tend to we aim for that field, we aim to like
Mhm.
push through that wall in the dark well and open into that other room, the lodge or whatever is on the other side,
Yeah.
and
Hopefully not the black one.
not the White
Yeah.
Lodge, okay?
All right, the White Lodge.
Yeah.
Good,
Uh,
good, good, good.
and I mean that I think that's the beauty of art, right? That is
Mhm.
ultimately what we're doing here. That's the beauty of art and culture and civilization and people.
Mhm.
Whether I don't know, and I think that a lot of it gets lost in the digital like labyrinth when we cuss each other out on
Yeah.
Substack and stuff. And some people deserve to be cussed out.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
My favorite post that I get on Substack and what makes all of it worth it is when you have a lurker come out from lurking and go, Fisto, that was fucking hilarious. And like, you've never seen this guy post, you have no idea who it is, and he just goes, dude, I'm dying. Thank you. For
Right.
me, that's
That's
when,
awesome.
I mean, the Substack stuff, whatever, like, yeah, the digital stuff. But I guess if you hit it hard enough with a hammer, even divine shit will come out of the internet if you hit
No,
it hard
Oh
enough with a
yeah.
hammer.
it's
Yeah,
true. I
it
mean, we
will.
are
Yeah.
connected through the digital labyrinth right now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
ultimately, right?
But man, that's my
There's
favorite.
goodness to it, right? All
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
Brad. So
Yeah.
before we leave, you're going to start
Yeah.
a new podcast. You want to tell us a little bit about that, or give
Ooh,
us a
yes,
Yeah,
please.
I'll tell you a little bit. I think I've only told a few people about this sort of in my personal life. So uh you guys may be familiar with, maybe not. Aaron Gwynn and I are starting a podcast together. Um Formerly the Blood Meridian guy. And we're calling it Method and Madness. And we're not gonna focus on I got part of the reason I'm not doing Art of Darkness anymore is I kind of got burnt out on doing biographies. It's a lot of
Mm,
work. You're reading a lot, and it was interesting, and we did a lot of them, but I didn't feel the need to do those anymore. And so we're doing, we're gonna Aaron and I have similar enough tastes, but different enough perspectives that I think we're going to be able to do something pretty cool. First episode we're talking about is Moby Dick. We're going to dig into what Moby Dick is and, how it was how it was written and, what a modern reader slash writer could get from it. And then we're going to do my part, which is the madness part, just following various rabbit holes that the book has, Moby Dick has kind of urged me into. So I think, we're going to try to conduct a little alchemy here. That'll be coming out in January. We'll be releasing our first episode. So
Well, that's
look forward to
awesome.
that.
So I always
Yeah.
need more podcasts to listen to and more
Yeah,
books,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And I'm
It
That
gonna
doesn't
sounds really
even have a
cool.
website yet, so just follow me on Twitter, Brad Kelly, or Substack, bradkellyesks.substack.com. Yeah, we don't even. There's no episodes out yet. I'm literally
Man,
before we met, I'm building the website, so it's all very nascent at this point, but
we
it
got the
will be
inside
out.
scoop. We got the inside
Yeah,
scoop. Doesn't even have a website yet, guys.
Yeah, well, see, this is why
It's
people come on.
exclusive.
This is why
yeah,
people come on Substack's best podcast, so
that's
Yeah.
right.
they can talk about for 2 hours about spiritual moments around
Yeah.
campfires instead of the
Yeah.
books
And
we're
then
trying to
get a
sell.
and then get a creepy and then get a creepy record store owner recommendation at the
Oh,
end of it.
we definitely did creepy store
Yeah,
owner.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I'm a fan of Aaron Gwynn. I was a dick to him on Twitter the other day,
yeah.
like 2 weeks ago, and I'm gonna apologize to Aaron Gwynn on the air here because I lashed out at him over the Cormac McCarthy thing,
That
and
that was yeah, that was I think that was a tricky moment for all us Cormac McCarthy fans.
yeah, it was.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I slipped into it. I was actually at work working a night shift, and I was just like, this guy, he pissed me off. Why did he do that? And
Nurse, cancel
Yeah.
my appointments.
I was
Somebody
like,
has
Yeah.
God
consulted
damn
with
it.
Cormac
It's
McCarthy.
like,
I got a shit post on Twitter about
Yeah.
I'm
it.
working in
Yeah.
the freaking urgent care room, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
you better not.
Yeah.
I'm trying to read this Vanity Fair article about Cormac McCarthy and his 14-year-old girlfriend or whatever.
Right.
Like this is
Right.
serious. This is a serious literary
This is
shit
serious.
here.
I understand that you've shattered your leg, but there are more important
Yeah,
things
Yeah.
send him to
in
X-ray.
life.
Take your time
Right.
driving
Just
him
get him out of
there.
here. Yeah,
Yeah.
Deal with it. Walk it off. All right,
Yeah.
just
But
walk it off.
yeah, so
leave me
I
alone.
do apologize for my internet brain. I actually been meaning to apologize to him for a while now, and
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
No,
know.
man.
He has no idea who I am. He's got way more followers. I don't use
Well,
Twitter as much.
the thing I love Aaron. He puts it out there, and sometimes the internet is not friendly to him about it. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting. It's he's got an interesting internet presence, man, because he does occasionally step in it. I mean, he got all of basically the entire humanities, uh, whatever you want to call it, academic world against them last year because he said he'd never read Borges, and the pylon was incredible.
That's all he had to do. I had to take notes
Yeah,
from this guy. I had to
yeah.
take notes from that's
Yeah,
kind of
but
impressive.
I
All
so
right, let's
me,
go.
me,
He
and- me
he
and
didn't even diss Borges. He's just like, I never really read it, and it was
Oh,
just
that's so
like it
good.
was like insane.
He's like,
Oh,
Yeah.
he's like,
So
Proust,
Andy.
Proust sucks. Fuck your
right,
Madeleines, bro. You're like, what? And then like,
right.
you're
Oh
done.
man,
No, but
I'm getting tingly just thinking about it. Oh, that's so good.
Fisto and I are
Rage.
not, we've, because we straddle the sides, I mean,
Mhm.
ultimately, we are anarchs here on this podcast,
Yeah,
right? So we
that's how
take
I
no
think of
sides.
myself. Yeah,
I
Yeah.
don't like anybody. Like, if you try to tell me what to do, I fucking hate you.
right.
I'm one of
Yeah.
those guys that, like,
Yeah.
if I lived in a fascist dictatorship, I would be, Roberto Boliano, and I'd be a
Yeah.
communist. And if I
Yep.
lived under communism, I would be a fascist. And it's just how
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
how it is. It just
Mm.
I can't I despise anybody that tries to like, make our lives mundane,
Yeah.
or to
Amen.
profane our artistic freedom. Okay, so you're
Yeah.
my enemy. That if you're that person, so I've made
Yeah.
enemies on all sides. Like we've joked around here. We've been called, what is it? We've been called communists. We've been called fascists. We've been called
Right.
Misogynists. That's a
volcano
popular one
demon
lately.
worshippers.
Volcano Jew demon lovers.
Yeah, I've been
Or
called
Yeah.
an
something like
I've
that.
been called an anti-Semite and a Jew loving volcano demon lover
Oh,
by the
Oh,
wow.
that one was
Nazis.
good.
So the Nazis
Wait,
hate me.
volcano lover? That's
Yeah,
cool. That's
Yeah.
a new one.
something to do with paganism. I don't know. I just
Doesn't
Yeah,
find it
I
matter. It
see.
doesn't
into
matter.
it.
Yeah,
It
I've
doesn't
gotten the
matter.
pagan charge. Yeah.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
basically blocked like once a day, and
Yeah.
if you want to like spaz out, my Substack subscriptions go up and down all the time because sometimes I just get in a
Nice.
fucking mood and I just want to post something that
Sure.
pisses everybody
Yeah.
off.
Hey, man.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what, like I'll
You
post
know,
something, but
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you do it too, man. You like
Oh,
to
absolutely.
shit
Yeah,
post,
without hesitation. Look, when somebody brings up so and so said such and such, and it elicited the mob upon him, I lean forward and take notes. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Okay.
let's
Yeah. How do
write
you
that
do
down.
that? Yeah.
How did okay? And he said what specific words? Okay,
Right.
who did? Okay, so but I mean, like I was gonna say, speaking of losing subscribers, so like this, being on something like Substack is new for me. I missed Twitter. I never did it, so I don't know how
Mhm.
any of this stuff works. It's all new to me. But I posted an essay last week where I talked a little bit about Genghis Khan, and I lost 5 subscribers. That's like the greatest drop I've ever experienced. And I'm like, for the glory of the great Khan, fine. Perfect. If you don't like Genghis Khan, great. I hope he comes back at the end of days and eats you alive. I'm perfectly fine with this. I am now going to be con maxing for the next like month and a half because it pissed off one person.
But
It's fucking, I don't even know.
sometimes I post what I think is obvious bait, like my little Myers-Briggs INTP thing that I posted,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
nobody takes it. I'm like, oh come on, I
Come
wanted to
on.
argue with you. Like,
Well, it's
my
like
feminist bait was good. I did attract a good one on that one, so it
it's
was
like they
pretty good.
say most of our lives are lived in mundane bait, but then every so often we step into the divine bait,
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
then time expands and becomes larger. And
I was expecting more crap for loving Harry Potter.
yeah, me too.
Man,
was
you
really
never,
surprising.
enough.
That was
you
really
never
surprising.
know. You can never predict this
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
man.
you're right.
You know what?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
it's
take
really hard.
I'm gonna post a picture of my wand that I bought it in Orlando because I went. So I'm not a Harry Potter dude at all. I've actually never read the novels, and I just
Yeah.
watched the movies for the first time like last year because my daughter got into them, and I was
Sure,
watching
yeah.
with my daughter, and I was like, "Oh, these are actually pretty good. I can see why freaking
They
people
are
love
pretty
these."
good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I took her to for last Christmas, exactly at this time last year. I took her to Orlando Studios, and we did the whole Harry Potter thing. And you know
Yeah,
what?
I was just there, man. Yeah.
I grew up poor, right? So when we went to Disneyland when I was a little kid, we never got got shit, right? You know, me and my brother, like mom's like, I can't afford this. I'm sorry. You get a balloon and like a churro or something, right? So now
Balloon
that
and churro.
I'm not rich by any means, but like I have more money to spend than my parents did. I spoil my kids. So we went out all out. I wore my Gryffindor sweater hoodie that I bought, and
Nice.
we bought the, you know, the wands that like do crap around the park and stuff. And I bought my Sirius black wand, and you know, she got her Ravenclaw stuff, and it's like it's just
Dang.
fun to hang out with the kids. You know, have you gone to the Sirius Black part yet, Fisto? He's the best character in the.
No, not yet. So we've watched just the first two movies.
Okay, the third movie is where
Um,
like it clicks, man. That's where
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
goes
yeah,
off.
yeah. That's probably going to be this weekend, either this week or this weekend. But we'll probably knock a
They're
couple out.
Christmas movies,
We'll
man.
not,
There are
yeah,
Kinda.
Christmas
exactly.
movies,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's spirit of the season,
Yeah,
We'll knock
for
a couple
sure.
out. The thing that got me where it clicked, I saw Sorcerer's Stone ages ago, and I don't remember it at all. But where it clicked for me is like, I mean, all the magic stuff, it's funny, all right. It's a lot of it is just humor. And like in the second movie, when he pulls a literal sword out of a hat, I was like, oh, that's just a really big wizard joke. That's hilarious. That's fantastic. Like that's
Yeah,
just funny.
yeah.
But where it clicked for me that, oh shit, this is the real deal, is at the end where they're passing out the points or whatever, and then Dumbledore tells that kid, it takes a lot to stand up to your enemies, but even more to stand up to your friends. And I was like,
Mm,
that's some Bonhoeffer shit right there. Yeah, let's go. All
yeah.
right, cheap and great. Yeah. And I was like, this is good stuff. Like, I'm gonna show my kids this.
No,
Like,
it
No,
is very
have
I
good.
some?
think
Yeah,
thematically,
there you
I think
go.
thematically it is pretty good for kids from what
Yeah,
I've seen.
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
like,
of
yeah,
course it is.
it encourages like courage and individuality and sort of
Yeah.
standing up for the right thing. And
Yeah. And then
it's
of
all
course the
good.
mystical, all that stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
come on, we're talking about Santa Claus, all right? Well,
Right.
is Harry
Yeah.
Potter for real? Well, do you want the answer
Right.
now or not?
Right.
Like,
Right.
Right.
yeah, same thing.
And you know what? It's you know I think I commented on your post. I was like, just don't be autistic about it, you know?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
people go, oh well, the magic makes
Wisdom
no
for
sense.
life.
I'm like, well, no, it doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. It's stupid. Of course it's stupid, but it's not about the magic system or whatever,
Right. Right.
nerd. You
You're
know?
watching you're watching a feature film beamed across radio waves into your living room and you're yelling about magic.
Right. It's about three
Yeah,
friends,
exactly.
going
Yeah,
through some trials meant
right.
for children to grow up with children. It makes perfect sense. Chocolate frogs that
Yeah.
come alive and move around. That's cool, man. Just
Yeah,
just
sure, why
just
not?
just vibe
It's
with it,
funny.
dude. You know what I mean? But yeah, like, that's part of the fun. For all its ills, the internet can lead to amazing things like us talking right now
Yep.
Yeah.
and you sharing your podcast, and I'm looking forward to it actually. I knew you were doing a new podcast. I heard it on the last episode of Art of Darkness,
Yeah.
season 5 preview thing you guys did. Um,
Yeah.
and I sorry. And I got excited about that. I'm like, oh, I need another freaking podcast. So it's great that Art of Darkness is still going.
Yeah.
And I like the new co-host they picked. She did that fantastic Aleister Crowley episode,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Well, no, so Abby, that's a different person.
oh,
So
that's a different person.
Abby was on the Roberto Bolaño
Oh,
episode
that's
and on
that's my
the
other favorite episode.
Alfred Hitchcock episode.
Okay.
So
I
yeah.
love a quick aside. Before listening to you guys do the Roberto Bolaño episode, I avoided Latin American literature with a passion, right?
Oh
I
man, you're
I
missing
think I
out.
was I think I was exposed to it like I just whenever I thought Latin American fiction, I thought like, going to Abuelita's house and the magic
Hmm.
mangoes and shit like that, and just really
Hmm.
annoying stuff I didn't want to deal with. I was like, I don't want to deal with this stuff, right?
Hmm.
And then you guys did Roberto Bolaño. I was like, okay, let me read this. And then now he's probably in the top 3 of my favorite authors. I mean,
Oh, excellent.
I
Yeah.
I read, as soon as I finished the episode, I read, The Savage Detectives, which, I mean, it's
Yeah. It's great.
fantastic. And I was like, oh, that's my life growing up. And then
Yeah.
I'm an info realist, guys. Get ready for it.
Yeah.
And 2666 or whatever, I don't know the
Yeah.
proper way of calling it, is that mind blowing. Like
Yes.
it's
Yes.
it's
It
just
is.
like it's such a it's one of the darkest novels I've ever read. That
Yeah, for
chapter
sure.
is motherfucker, dude. That depressed me. Like you can't get more depressing than that chapter in that novel. But then it's funny
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, it is. It
He's got
is.
a weird.
Bolaño's sort of like the register he writes at is fucking amazing. Like it is. It's funny and sort of it's sort of sloppy at times almost,
Right.
Not sloppy, but less like thrown together feeling sometimes. But man, yeah, it's I just read not too long ago and I was on Rare Candy's Gain of Fiction episode talking about By Night in Chile.
Yeah, I bought it because of that episode. It's sitting on my desk
Okay.
right now.
It's good, man. It's fucking good. Yeah, yeah.
As soon
So
as I'm done
yeah,
with
that guy's a
Murakami, as soon
master.
as I'm done with Murakami, I'm gonna move on to that one. I
Yeah.
picked that one up too because I've read Cowboy Graves, which is a short story collection. I haven't read
Okay.
Amulet. There's a
I haven't
few
read that.
I'm missing a few. I'm trying to savor all of them.
Yeah, I there's a few I haven't. I've read Savage Detectives 2666 and By Night in Chile. That's all. That's the ones I've read.
Yeah,
So, and
but
they've all been
I've definitely
amazing.
become I read Borges after
Yeah.
Boliano,
Yeah.
and that's really
Yeah.
because of my friend Neil from Pylon Press. He is a Borges
Okay.
guy because he's
Yeah.
Argentinian, and he
Okay.
basically he would slap me if I said I didn't like Borges. He'd probably
Good old Neil.
he'd fly from France
Yeah,
over to my
yeah.
house and just
Yeah.
You would
slap me.
deserve it. You would deserve it.
Yeah,
He would drop that slap from orbit.
because whenever
Yeah.
he's on the podcast, he's been on twice or three times now. I don't even talk because I feel stupid
Yeah,
when he talks.
yeah, yeah.
Like
That
he was
that
on there, he's like, just talk, Neil, and he just makes you feel retarded. You're like, you know what you're talking
Nice.
about.
Everybody
Um,
needs that friend.
yeah, but so you got your podcast coming up. You have another
Yeah.
novel coming up, which sounds fantastic. It's about sewers in Detroit, right? If I'm
It
remembering.
is, yeah, largely.
fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I had a one of my jobs. I still sort of have it, but I've sort of switched positions. I spent a lot of time in the sewers of Detroit, and
No
I
kidding.
I at least got this novel out of it. So it's a sort of a mind bender,
Cool.
cosmic blue collar cosmic horror set underground. So check out for that. The
That
Earthen
sounds
Dark. That'll be out at some point. The first chapter of it is on my Substack, actually.
Yeah, it's
So
that
good.
sounds.
people want to
Hey,
check that
It's
out.
good.
Alex, let's make sure we link that. I grew up in Cleveland, so like anything about Detroit, I'm like, oh, that's kind of
Oh yeah.
hometown. That's kind of hometown. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah. There's
oh, that
Cleveland
sounds
and
fun.
Detroit have very similar vibes
Yeah.
for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I've never
Massive
been.
losers. No, I'm just kidding.
Never been. The most northern city I've ever been
Cool.
to is Pittsburgh.
Ah, yeah.
Fuck Pittsburgh, man. No, I'm just kidding. Fine. It's
We're
fine.
gonna
I
we're
love
gonna have
Pittsburgh.
we're gonna have the Prince of Pittsburgh on this podcast too. So
Really? I'm supposed to
yeah,
fuck out of him.
yeah,
Who's the Prince of Pittsburgh?
he's a that's what I call him. He's a fantasy writer named Schuyler Hernstrom. He's one of the best sword and
Okay.
sorcery kind of like
Oh,
metaphysical
cool.
fantasy writing. He's kind of big in that scene. He's one of the Pylum guys, and I drove up to Pittsburgh to hang out with him, and
Cool.
he just showed me around, so I kept on calling him the Prince of Pittsburgh because he's from Pittsburgh.
Nice. Nice.
So
Cool, man.
Man, man,
Yeah.
man, man, we gotta have like a Deceneus review like meet up in Pittsburgh or something. Just
it,
pick like a real Midwest shithole town. No,
well,
Youngstown.
hey,
That's
hey,
where we'll do it. We'll do it in
Andy,
Youngstown.
Andy Warhol is from Pittsburgh, okay? So
Oh,
Yeah.
there's
is he?
some cool elements to it. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to pick one of those cities so like one of us gets shot. Like
That's
that should
you
be a
do, that's
good
what you
story.
guys never did on Art of Darkness. Warhol.
What's that?
Warhol.
Yeah, I bet if you I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin plans on doing a Warhol episode
Okay.
this year. I
'Cause
know we had talked about it a
he's
lot.
definitely up there. The Bowie episode is
Yeah.
great, even
Yeah.
though I know
Yeah, for
everything
sure.
about Bowie already.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we covered that. We got that. So
Yeah.
last question. Okay,
Okay.
Here we go.
what is your
Here we
favorite
go.
tarot? What is your favorite tarot card, man? Like,
Oh,
which one speaks to you? Like, which one?
well, so here's the part of how I think about tarot. I don't know if I have a favorite. There's ones that are more and less interesting, but the one thing I think about a lot is trying to figure out what major arcana card sort of encapsulates the moment I'm in my life. And right now, that is the Star. Star is all about restoration and growth. Tom Berg Meditations on the Tarot says it's about the arcanum of the star is about the growth. It's about contemplating the correspondence between principles of biological growth and spiritual growth. And so I've been thinking a lot about that. It's also about restoring things. So it's about sort of like
Hmm,
the card right before it is the tower has crashed, right? The tower has been blown apart. And then
hmm.
the star card is about like how one puts pieces back together, uses sort of what they've managed to save from the collapse in order to build something new and hopefully even better. So I've been meditating on that quite a bit lately.
Right.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I did a spread for like the new year for myself, and
Very nice.
the main card was the star also.
Oh wow.
So it's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
interesting, and it was
Huh.
very appropriate because am starting new projects and moving away from old career parts and that kind of stuff. So I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Makes me
uh,
wonder. Makes me wonder if it isn't linked to my students' appreciation of the Hagia Sophia, which, if people don't know, was built in the wake of the Nika riots that had devastated
Yeah,
Constantinople, and it
that's
was the
right.
greatest church for 1,000 years.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
fun,
Uh,
fun, fun,
And
I'm
fun.
gonna
that's a
be
place I have actually been to Hagia Sophia. That is a place
Oh,
that
lucky
will, that's another
bastard.
place like Grand Canyon. You walk in there and you're like, why am I'm crying? Okay, I
Yeah,
guess
it's
I'm crying now.
fantastic. That's
Yeah, like
fantastic.
it's it's really something. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. And would you, if
Huh.
somebody wants to get into like, the whole tarot card thing or the whole,
Yeah.
would you, what deck would you recommend? The Rider White?
Rider Waite Smith. I recommend the Rider Waite Smith for a couple of reasons. One is it is the first deck other than the Solabuska, which is kind of a cheat. It's the first deck to have images of people or figures on the minor arcana. I believe that Pamela Coleman Smith created the art in a genuinely visionary state, and and most tarot decks that were created after it are essentially reimaginings of the Rider-Waite Smith. And if you pick up a book on the tarot, it's probably talking about the Rider-Waite Smith. So you have it's the most accessible because there's the most reference material associated with it. So to me, the Rider-Waite Smith is definitely the best place to start. It's kind of a personal bias, but that's
Right.
definitely my recommendation.
All right.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
guys. Hey, so Brad, thank you for coming on.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
thanks,
having me,
man.
man. This is
Wonderful,
great.
man. It was a great conversation.
Real
You're
pleasure.
always welcome back, and you're definitely going to be
Okay.
invited back when we do the our younger episode. That's
Yeah, let's do it, man.
sometime in
That'd
the
be awesome.
spring or something. And
Cool.
then we'll definitely be listeners of you guys' new podcast and still
Yeah.
listeners of Art of Darkness still.
Excellent.
For
Yeah.
all the listeners back home right now, if you haven't listened to Art of Darkness, go to their YouTube or their Spotify or they're everywhere, and just pick a random episode that interests you. Find an artist you like, and you're going to listen to all of them because that's what I did. I just went through the entire
Deal with
I
it.
went to the entire
Oh, that's awesome,
discography.
man.
Deal with it.
Um,
Yeah.
Read Brad's book House of Sleep. Pick up Brad's new book when it comes out. It's about tunnels and stuff. Actually, when you first described it, it made me think of the novel V by Pynchon,
Yeah.
about the rats in the sewers and the
Yeah, there's a little bit of that in there, I
yeah.
think. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the
for
kind of
sure.
vibe that Stewart part.
Yeah.
And pick up the book and support all the guys that do stuff. That's what we're doing. We're doing stuff
Amen.
outside the mainstream, okay? And we're just ordinary dudes out here trying to tap
We
into
out
the
here.
extraordinary. All right, that's what we're doing. So good night, guys. And for
Good night.
every listener, please like, share, subscribe, and all the fun, boring, stuff because that helps us spread the word. It helps us get Brad's books out to more listeners, and that's the whole point, right? If you can't do if you
Amen.
can't throw money our way or Brad's way, throw us some likes and some shares and get out there so we can get those patrons to help out. Okay.
Spread the Christmas spirit. Spread the Christmas joy, folks.
All right.
There you
Merry
go.
Christmas. This is
There
going
you
to be our
go.
last episode before Christmas, right?
Oh, that's
So
right.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Make sure to
Okay.
slap a
Yeah,
Santa
Merry
hat.
Christmas.
Slap a Santa hat on that avatar. All right. Spread the cheer and have a good time.
Yeah, and all the
Yeah.
stories about Santa are true.
They're all
Even your
true.
lies.
Mhm.
Okay.
Especially the lies.
Especially the lies. All right. Good night, guys. Thanks, Brad, one more time. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.